Hey, all right. Welcome back, YouTube.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to retaliate after Iran fired at least 180 ballistic missiles at Israel in response to repeated Israeli attacks on Lebanon and the assassination of several Hezbollah leaders, including Hassan Nasrallah. Video posted online shows some of the missiles striking at or near the Nevatim air base, which houses Israel's U.S.-made F-35 fighter jets. Israel says the only death from the attacks was a Palestinian man who was killed by falling debris in the occupied West Bank in Jericho. At the White House, President Biden responded by saying the United States will help Israel, quote, exact severe consequences, unquote. On Tuesday, a Pentagon spokesperson said U.S. forces had aided Israel in thwarting Iran's attack.
During the attack, the U.S. military coordinated closely with the Israeli Defense Forces to help defend Israel. U.S. Navy destroyers deployed to the Middle East region supported the defense of Israel by firing approximately a dozen interceptors against the incoming Iranian missiles.
In Tel Aviv, Israeli police said at least 7 people died in a shooting and stabbing attack on Tuesday. Israeli authorities claim the attack was carried out by 2 people from the occupied West Bank. One was shot dead, the other seriously wounded. In Lebanon, Hezbollah says its fighters have repelled incursions by Israeli forces attempting to invade southern Lebanon. Israeli media reports at least 2 Israeli soldiers were killed, 18 others wounded near the Lebanese border town of Odessa. Meanwhile, Israel's military ordered more residents of Beirut's southern suburbs to evacuate their homes. The UN says more than 1 million people across Lebanon have been uprooted by Israel's assault. In the Gaza Strip, Palestinian health officials say Israeli attacks have killed more than 79 Palestinians, wounding 82 others over the past 24 hours. In one strike, Israeli fighter jets bombed a school-turned-shelter in Gaza City's Tufah neighborhood, killing at least 13 people, including children. Israeli forces also bombed the Al-Amal orphanage west of Gaza City, killing 6 Palestinians and wounding many others. Here in New York, vice presidential nominees Tim Walz and J.D. Vance faced off in their first and only debate ahead of November's election. The two clashed when Walz questioned Vance about Trump's claims that the 2020 election was stolen.
Still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Senator Vance took aim at Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris's record on border security, while Walz condemned Donald Trump over abortion rights. Their sparring over abortion came as a new law took effect in Louisiana that reclassifies the abortion medications mifepristone and misoprostol, listing them as controlled dangerous substances. The first of its kind law in the country makes it a crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison to possess the medications without a prescription. In
This is
Ukraine,
bad.
authorities have declared a day of mourning in the southern city of Kherson, where a Russian attack on a market killed 6 people and wounded more than 10 others. Elsewhere, at least 1 person was killed and 32 injured when Russia bombed residential buildings and infrastructure in the southern Zaporizhzhia region. In eastern Ukraine, Russian forces have taken control of the city of Vuhledar, along with 2 more frontline villages. Meanwhile, Ukraine's top prosecutor says he's investigating the murder of 16 Ukrainian prisoners of war, alleging they were summarily executed after they were surrendered to Russian forces on the Eastern Front. In Brussels, Belgium, the former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte was sworn in as Secretary General of NATO Tuesday. In his inaugural speech, he pledged to shore up Western support of Ukraine and warned China over its growing ties with Russia.
Through its support for Russia's military industry, China has become a decisive enabler of Russia's war in Ukraine. China cannot continue to fuel the largest conflict in Europe since the Second World War without this impacting its interests and reputation.
The White House has approved an additional $567 million in U.S. military aid to Taiwan, the largest such aid package ever. Its approval came as Chinese authorities led celebrations marking the 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Chinese leader Xi Jinping spoke from Beijing.
Taiwan is a sacred territory of China, and the people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait are connected by blood, which is thicker than water.
President Xi warned against separatist activities, as he put it, in Taiwan, and said its reunification with China is inevitable. Claudia Sheinbaum was sworn in as Mexico's first female president Tuesday, pledging her 6-year term will be a time for transformation. Sheinbaum has vowed to strengthen women's rights in Mexico, which has one of the highest rates of femicide, to expand access to public health care and education and other social reforms that have been bolstered by the ruling Morena Party. Sheinbaum received the baton of power from Indigenous and Afro-Mexican women who joined her on stage as she addressed thousands of supporters gathered in Mexico City's Zocalo Square.
I am certain that power is honesty and humility, that our thinking is Mexican humanism, that our nation and people are great, and I am certain we are the only option that represents well-being and progress with justice.
Here in the United States, the death toll from Hurricane Helene has surpassed 166 people across 6 states, with hundreds still missing, more than 5 days after the storm triggered devastating floods and landslides. Massive power outages continue to impact over 1.3 million customers. In eastern Tennessee, at least 6 plastic factory workers are missing and presumed dead after floodwaters swelled around their workplace, trapping the group of predominantly Latinx workers who for hours clung to the back of a semi-truck before they were swept away by the deluge. Some family members report the employer, Impact Plastics, told the workers not to evacuate and threatened to fire anyone who left ahead of the storm. This is Robert Jarvis, one of the survivors.
What would you say to the company?
Why'd you make us work that day? Why? We shouldn't have worked. We shouldn't have been there. None of us should have been there. And that's what I should have said to them.
Hurricane Helene has become the second deadliest hurricane after Katrina. The state of Texas has put another prisoner to death. On Tuesday, 61-year-old Garcia Glenn White was strapped to a gurney in the state penitentiary in Huntsville and injected with a single lethal dose of the drug pentobarbital. It was the 6th execution carried out in the United States in the last 11 days. An investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice has found violence and sexual assault are rife in prisons across Georgia, constituting cruel and unusual punishment for the state's estimated 50,000 incarcerated people. The scathing report by the DOJ's Civil Rights Division found Georgia fails to protect people in custody from extreme violence inside 34 state prisons, as well as 4 prisons run by for-profit corporate contractors. It also found an unconstitutional risk of harm from sexual violence at these prisons, including widespread sexual assaults of LGBTQ+ people. Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark leads the Justice Department Civil Rights Division.
In America, time in prison should not be a sentence to death, torture, or rape. We can't turn a blind eye to the wretched conditions and wanton violence unfolding in these institutions. The people incarcerated in these jails and prisons are our neighbors, siblings, children, parents, family members, and friends.
And the Justice Department has announced a federal investigation in the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre after Oklahoma Supreme Court in June dismissed a lawsuit brought by 2 elderly survivors. No one's ever been charged over the murders of an estimated 300 black people who were killed when a white mob burned down what was known as Black Wall Street, the thriving African-American neighborhood of Greenwood. The Justice Department will probe the killings under the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act, which gives the federal government the power to reopen civil rights-related cold cases. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our VP debate stream.
Some of them, though, were not. They're
see some of those on Iran. We do have a discount that we're running right now. Can we put that A1, please, up on the screen, guys, for all of our would-be premium subscribers? BP 2024. So there we go. But with that hardest pivot of all time, straight up massive war in the Middle East.
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't think it's hyperbolic to say, I mean, we are truly poised on the brink of a massive regional, if not larger, war. We can go ahead and put some images up on the screen here, not entirely unexpected, but still obviously dramatic and deeply disturbing. You had a barrage of missiles fired at Israel, appears to be at military sites within Israel across the entire country. I'll just keep this footage rolling. Some of those missiles, which were reportedly ballistic and hypersonic, some of them were, of course, shot down by the Israeli Iron Dome missile defense system. Some of them, though, were not. You can see some of those impacting the ground. That may be the ones in Tel Aviv. I'm not sure. I know there were some in Tel Aviv, but really throughout the country. Still very much early hours in terms of assessing what the damage is. As far as we know, there was only one casualty. It was actually a Palestinian in the West Bank. And I believe the reporting I saw, and all of these things continue to be kind of murky, was that he was actually struck by the fallout from one of those Iron Dome interceptor missiles. So, obviously, we've been tracking very closely this continued escalation and the continued provocations from Israel that led to this point, and also the continued abdication of duty from the Biden administration, which is incredibly consequential here. You have this in response to a number of actions, including the targeted assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Iran's capital city of Tehran. We've been kind of waiting for some sort of response there from Iran. They've been, I have to say, very, sort of cautious and measured, and seem very much not to want to get pulled into a further escalation. And then, of course, you had the massive attacks on Hezbollah, both with the pager and walkie-talkie attacks, and then with the assassination of Nasrallah, along with the decimation using over 80 2,000-pound bombs of somewhere around 1,000 Lebanese people as well, quite a number of women and children among them. You now have the early phases of a ground invasion into Lebanon, so Iran saying that these strikes are in retaliation for those actions. The latest we know is that it appears the U.S., of course, standing strong with Israel. They have a right to defend themselves, all the things you would expect them to say. Kamala Harris came out and gave a big speech saying, you know, everything you would expect her to say. Nothing off script there. And Israel threatening an aggressive response in reaction to this. And so, you know, Ryan, I think this is, we were joking, it's like gallows humor. This is like the least surprising October surprise of all time, because we have watched the way that Bibi has continued to want to escalate and expand this war. And that's no surprise. That's in his political interest. It's in his long-term ideological interest. And Joe Biden has said from the beginning that avoiding what you're seeing on your screen right now, that this was his primary goal with respect to Israel and Palestine. And yet through his refusal to ever say no at any juncture and do anything other than, you know, leak to the oh my gosh, I'm so angry, I'm so upset, et cetera. This is the incredibly predictable, almost certain result of that inaction from the Biden administration.
Yeah, and we have so the IRGC put out a statement, which I think is really interesting if you parse it, where they say this was done, quote, in response to the assassination of Martyr Hania, Syed Hassan Nasrallah, and Sadr Nifo Rashan, we targeted important targets. So because the IRGC waited to respond at the behest of the United States, Israel kind of got a twofer here, because they're responding at once to the assassination of Hania in Tehran, and then also to the assassination of their top officials in Beirut, plus of Nasrallah. But then they say, and this is the key detail, they say, if the Zionist regime responds to our attack, our next attacks will be more devastating. And they note in their statement that they targeted 3 military bases: Nevatim, which houses F-35 aircraft; Netzarim, which houses F-15 jets used in the assassination of Nasrallah, and Tel Naf base near Tel Aviv. So they were very clear, we're not going after civilian targets, we're going after military targets, and they explain why they went after the military targets. And then they say, basically, if you don't strike back, this is over. Like, we had to save face, you did all of these things to us, now we've done these things to you, we're even. The US has responded by calling it a brazen attack and saying that Iran must be punished. Iran, you know, the U.S. could come out and say, all right, you know what? You actually did blow up a guy in Tehran, and you actually did blow up their generals in Beirut.
Well, and they
responded.
Last time, reportedly, Biden urged Bibi to say, listen, you shot down their missiles.
Right.
Let's call it even.
Right.
And stop there. Now, obviously, it didn't stop there. But
it did, because that was April.
For a time.
So
for
we
a
haven't.
time.
Right.
Yes.
Well, let's be clear, though. In terms of the White House statement, you know, so far and everything, I spent the entire day for, you know, RIP myself, watching every, like, government press conference, State Department, Pentagon, and all of this. Were you there?
I got dissed, no question.
Oh, interesting. Well, there you go. Yeah. I'm sure he knew.
There were some other good questions that were asked.
The most important one to me was actually Jake Sullivan's statement, where in Jake Sullivan's statement, he said he saw it as an escalatory, quote, significant escalation, and that we will work with Israel in their response, tacitly, basically greenlighting this. We should not forget what happened last time. So yes, the White House did put out a statement and saying, hey, you guys shouldn't do anything. But a lot of people forget that the Israelis, remember, struck that air defense system that's right outside an Iranian nuclear site, which was actually very militarily significant. Because if I pair it with some of the statements that are coming out of the Israeli highest echelons, we are seeing open calls for a couple of things. One, to wipe out Iranian oil refineries. Two is to wipe out Iranian nuclear facilities, which specifically that previous strike was like a warning. It's like, hey, we took out the air defense, we can come back here if we want to, just to show you. Three is actually just straight up regime change. And I have been deeply concerned here, because the most senior elements of the Israeli regime, all from people inside and outside the government. You know, I was watching MSNBC actually to see if Ehud Omer, who has criticized Bibi at points, to see what he would say. He was advocating for regime change in Iran. We have Naftali Bennett, the previous prime minister here, theoretically, who was in opposition. He has a long statement out. He says Israel has now the greatest opportunity in 50 years to change the face of the Middle East. The leadership of blah, 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 made a terrible mistake. He says we must now remove this terrible threat to our children's future, which can grant the Iranian people an opportunity to rise up and shake off the regime that tyrannizes its women and its daughters. So clearly now, regime change is like the uniparty decision here that has been arrived at the elites with Tel Aviv and at the top of the Israeli government. So when we combine that with what we previously saw from them, I don't think it is out of the question to say that we could see a full-on IDF bombing of major targets all across Iran, on top of a possible assassination of the Ayatollah Khomeini. So previously, I was watching some senior military officials, former IDF and others, who were on Fox News, and almost immediately after the strike, like minutes afterwards, they were saying, oh, well, the Ayatollah is now somebody that we could see here. So it is very, very possible that in the next week or so, we see an actual campaign of regime change that is potentially foisted or on Iran by Israel. But there's no question that any of us should have that this will not involve the United States. We would give them the weapons to do so. 24 interceptors were actually fired by U.S. Navy assets. I did the back
Plus
of the napkin.
some in the Iraq base, I think.
We are at $100 million for today, just today, in terms of how much it costs to shoot down that. The Iranians, remember, have some of the largest ballistic missile, I believe one of the largest stocks in the entire world. Quite cheap, and they've been preparing for this for quite a long time. Another big tell is that if you guys have seen, the Israelis keep saying this was a very successful operation. It's not a success if some of the missiles get in. It's a failure. If a missile strikes your military assets, that is a huge failure. Also, what would the number be if America didn't fire some 24 of those 180 out of the sky? I think we actually know what the answer is. And so when you start to put all of these together, really we actually saw part of the Israeli responses, they're like, we need to have deterrence restored. That's a tell, because they keep saying it was an ineffective attack. No, it's not an ineffective attack. It struck military targets inside of Israel. It didn't kill anyone, probably more by design. On the Iranian side.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, this was intended to overwhelm the Iron Dome. That's the saturation ballistic missiles. When you do that, you're specifically trying to overwhelm the Iron Dome.
Yes.
So that's obviously what happened.
And that's another thing. There's Iron Dome, there's Arrow 3, and there's David Sling. So Iron Dome typically used for rockets. I believe the ballistic missile defense, Arrow 3, David Sling also was engaged. But anyways, I mean, and also, who wants to know who sells each of the parts of all three of those?
Go look at the stock market.
You're right. Where do you think all those come from? Every single one is from the United States. So we are fully going to be involved. And if you think that there's going to be an Israeli attempt to overthrow, how many people live in Iran? Tens of millions. A country of 10 million can try and have regime change in a country of tens of millions of people, massive, a traditional power center
if they can kill
in
Khomeini,
the Middle East.
Yeah.
Right, okay, but that's not actually, wouldn't wipe out this quote-unquote the regime. If they want a full-on type of regime change, there's no question about who's actually going to be the person footing that bill. So we're in a very precarious moment. America is basically tacitly greenlighting an Israeli bombing of Iran, something Obama worked tirelessly in an office to try to prevent. I mean, this is really shocking.
I don't even think you can say tacitly when, tacitly backing it. Right. Based on the public comments and also based on the report that we got that Brett McGurk and others in the White House were privately encouraging the invasion and the attacks in Lebanon over the objections of the Department of Defense and the State Department. So they, have bought into the philosophy of Netanyahu, and how much Biden's involved in that or not at this point, who the hell knows?
That's what's terrifying.
But they have bought into the philosophy, first the escalate to de-escalate. How's that working out for you? But now I think that at least the key officials like Brett McGurk, who seem to be running the show, they have bought into this idea of this is our moment to remake the Middle East. This is our moment
to strike the nuclear,
to strike Iran, to diminish the influence of Iran in the region. And so I don't think it's tacit. I think it's an explicit support for continued spiraling escalation and Israeli, overwhelming response here.
To Sagar's point about what we were hearing immediately from some ex-military guys, people who are sort of in those orbits on Fox News and other channels, that was absolutely, this is the time. If ever there is a time to strike the Iranian missiles and nuclear program, it is now. There will not be a better opportunity. This is a time for regime change. It's a time for dramatic attacks on the nuclear program. This is it. You have to seize it. And what I find to be completely terrifying is the disagreement that we've seen in the administration, when you have the Pentagon saying, and then you have the Biden administration, we still don't know to what extent the president of the United States, who was so incapacitated that his own party didn't think that he could run on the ticket after millions of people had voted for him and he had been nominated. He's that incapacitated. And right now we're engaged in a war where there are multiple nuclear powers. We're funding a proxy war with an ally that's a nuclear power in Ukraine right now. It's incredibly fragile, and Joe Biden is. We don't even understand what he thinks about any of this.
I
Jake
feel
Sullivan.
like I'm going nuts. Like, we have $100 billion of the weapons flowing into Ukraine. Our factories can barely keep up there. We've got, by the way, I heard a very telling comment from the Pentagon today at the press briefing, if you listen closely, where they basically quasi-confirmed that they had, quote, doubled the number of assets in the region for Israel. Well, we know the back of the napkin math was 40,000. So are we at 80,000 people who are now in the Middle East? 80,000 people? We have 2 aircraft carriers. We have multiple U.S. Navy destroyers. The USS Cole is one of those that fired today.
China's eager about that.
Well, and so there's a lot. At the geopolitical situation, we have never been more overstretched or less prepared, actually, for 2 massive wars. Even to just be funding, it actually be physically impossible for us to even fund both Israel and Ukraine at the same time, let alone actually have to engage our own people. Another point where I feel extremely black-pilled is just on the uniformity of the American political system. And if you read, I have the Kamala statement in front of me. Iran is a destabilizing, dangerous force in the Middle East. Today's attack on Israel only further demonstrates that. As I have said, I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist militias. My commitment to the security of Israel is unwavering. Let us be clear, Iran is not only a threat to Israel, Iran is a threat to American personnel in the region. Why are they there? Anyone want to say that? American interests and innocent civilians across the region who suffer at the hands of Iran-based and Iran-backed terrorist proxy. That is the and then continuing. We will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend U.S. forces and interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. That's a Trump statement. That's a Biden statement.
If you read that statement, I would have no idea what it could be. Almost literally any outside of we could name the few. It's not Rashida Tlaib.
Thomas Massey.
It's not Rashida Tlaib's statement. It's not Thomas Massey.
That's about
it's not AOC. You've got a few.
And
but
really
outside of that, it could literally be any of them.
It's replacement level.
And in the real world, the statement only makes sense if you reverse the countries Iran and Israel. Like, who's the destabilizing influence in the region here? This week, Jared Kushner basically, did you see this? He basically said, he said what you were saying, just people are saying after the strike. But before the strike, he was saying, now is the moment. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. There's no chance that they missed that in Iran, as they're sitting around, wondering, when and whether they're going to respond. And then Netanyahu does his English language video to the Iranian people, which is do you think we're all stupid?
Why don't we play that? We have B4. Ready, everybody? Let's go ahead, Eric, if you can, and we'll let us all take a listen.
I speak a lot about the leaders of Iran. Yet at this pivotal moment, I want to address you, the people of Iran. I want to do so directly, without filters, without middlemen. Every day, you see a regime that subjugates you make fiery speeches about defending Lebanon, defending Gaza. Yet every day, that regime plunges our region deeper into darkness and deeper into war. Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Mohammed Deif. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss. The vast majority of Iranians know their regime doesn't care a whit about them.
I was just saying, incredible to hear him in one breath say Iran's dragging the region into war, and then in the next breath brag about all of the various bombs that they're dropping. But this is laying the predicate for regime change.
Right, this was before the Iran strike.
This was before the Iran strike.
Just to be clear.
That's exactly right. And it's very similar language to what we heard before Gaza. Our war is not with the people of Gaza, even as they're saying that we're going to treat them like animals, we're going to cut off the food, the water, et cetera, et cetera. Very similar language before they went into Lebanon. And now we see this language as they, as they begin this escalation with Iran.
And if you follow Yunus Tarawi or others who are reporting on Gaza, the slaughter there is just ramping up now. Now that people are wondering, like, okay, what's the Israeli response going to be, and watching the Iranian attack, and they're just unleashing all bloody hell.
Well, and wasn't
what's left of Gaza
hit by some of the missiles today?
I thought that was...
No, it was West Bank.
I know West Bank was.
West Bank.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we just zoom out, right now, Israel is bombing Gaza. They've invaded the West Bank. They're bombing Yemen. They're bombed Syria. They're bombing Lebanon. And they're about to bomb Iran. And it's also really important in all of this not to lose sight of what this all comes back to. I mean, the Israeli officials said it quite plainly to NBC News. The reason they assassinated Nasrallah, the reason they decided to assassinate him now, is because he would not decouple a deal with Israel from a ceasefire in Gaza. The missiles start from Hezbollah after October 7th in, what they see as defense of Gaza. And they have been consistent the whole time. Listen, come to a ceasefire, this all ends. We know that that was true because when there was a ceasefire for a very short period of time, not only from Hezbollah, but from the other Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria and elsewhere, they stopped firing missiles. The Houthis stopped doing what they were doing during that period of ceasefire. So all of this could have been avoided. And
could be tomorrow.
If only.
Tonight.
Obviously, Bibi's not going to. If only Joe Biden would say, I'm not shipping you arms. Like, I'm done. I am not sending you the weapons to continue this. And they are wholly dependent on our weapons shipments. Wholly dependent. It could be over tomorrow. And
then we'd have an interesting election on it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Bibi, take it to the American people.
And that's the other thing is, I think we all know Bibi would prefer to have Trump in the White House. I'm beginning to wonder if Joe Biden would prefer to have Trump in the White House, because it sure as hell seems like he's laying out the red carpet for him to come in. I mean, not to turn it right to the horse race, but it will be interesting to hear what these two candidates have to say tonight. I imagine they'll be competing over who can be more hawkish.
Yes, but JD...
who can be more aggressive.
Right. JD and Trump have the easier job of... It never would have happened if we were in office. And that's, I saw an interesting, I think he's an Atlantic writer, Tyler Harper, very pro
he's good.
Kamala. And he put out an interesting, just like an observation. He was like, look, for all of us out there, he's like, I think you significantly underestimate this normie, like anti-war sentiment that a lot of people have with Trump. They don't follow the ins and outs and know that, Trump bombed, killed Soleimani or any of that. To them, they're like, well, there wasn't this going on when Trump was president, and now there's a lot of this stuff going on when Biden is president. Kamala, it sounds like she wants to continue the Biden policy. I don't like that. Yeah. And then Trump and JD can very easily, which the exact statement, the immediate statement from Trump that I saw that came out from the campaign, I don't even think it focused on, oh, Iran made a big mistake. It was like, Iran didn't do this while I was in office. Ukraine would never have happened. Iran never would have happened.
It's either. Chaos is bad for the incumbent.
Right, but there is an instinct of the sheer simplicity of that observation that I actually do think could be potentially powerful. That is also the danger that we've talked about probably ad nauseum now at this point on the show, is like the Kamala just clinging to the Biden policy is both crazy politically and I mean also just strategically as well. Wants to escalate the war in Ukraine, wants to escalate the war with Gaza, wants to basically back an Israeli invasion of Iran. I mean, can we all just sit and appreciate that? Like, we are basically co-signing a potential regime change operation in Iran. How did it go last time?
Netanyahu's wanted for decades.
He has wanted this for decades. He said it on, he said it on a hot mic. He said it on an open mic. He said it before Congress. This has been his ideological project. Also, we were just talking about how Gaza is getting hit. Another thing we're not even talking about? The hostages. Who? The only sympathetic thing that potentially could have constrained his power,
he's stopped
that's long
even
gone.
Pretending to care about
They don't care about them anymore. They either kill them or they let them die. They don't care.
They don't care.
The government's never
cared.
cared.
We've always known that they never cared.
Yeah.
Because from day one, there was a deal on the table, all for all. You release all our hostages, we release all your hostages.
There was also a deal on the table that they've talked about since then. They talked about this with Jeremy in some of his interviews. Within days, they said, look, this was a much bigger operation than we expected it was going to be. We will give you all the civilians if you pledge not to just send ground troops into Gaza. All of them right now. And then from there, you bomb us all you want, and we'll work out a deal for the military.
Glenn's conspiracy theory. Thank you.
Hostages that you have.
You've been surprisingly good chatter.
They put that deal on the table.
No.
Well,
I hope you have a great day.
Just thinking about when you have Israelis today hiding in bomb shelters and actual craters in Israeli territory, what that is going to do. Just psychologically, to the politics in Israel, what that's going to, how Netanyahu responds to that. Obviously, his political future is important because his actual freedom as a human being is on the line.
Well, they had a very it was either the Israel Twitter account or the IDF Twitter account. They often will do these weird cringe off. What is this? So the what is this tweet of theirs today? They wrote in all caps, "This is not normal."
Yeah. And
there's so many layers to that. What do you mean it's not normal? Do you guys not watch your own broadcasts? Do you not read your own news? What has your military been doing for 11 straight months if this isn't normal? What they're saying is not normal is that they're shooting back at them. And
hitting it, and actually hitting.
And what they're also saying is that this is not normal for white people. There's something, it's a message that's being sent to the US and Europe. We are your bastion of civilization. We should not have to live through this. These brown people, they're used to this violent environment. That's normal for them. For us, it's not normal. Times of Israel has an interesting line. They say, the exact locations of such impacts and damage are barred from publication by the IDF censor.
And you should note, clearly, a lot of those videos that were initially put out were taken down. The most important videos that are coming out are those that were filmed in the West Bank or in Gaza. That's the only reason that we know for sure, and from live TV cameras rolling here in the United States, that there were significant hits. So do not believe the Israelis whenever they say, oh, it was a 100, whatever bullshit number they put out like they did last time. There was damage that was happened tonight. And it happened to military assets, 100%.
There was damage in April as well.
Yes, that's right.
Leaked out. But there was complicity that everyone agreed to say, you know what? Let's not admit how much damage there was because that reduces public pressure.
Right.
So, okay, you know what?
Yeah, I almost can get behind that.
Yeah, there was no damage.
But that's fine if you want to say that.
Fine.
But the thing is
we're a news organization, so we're going to have to say that.
It also doesn't appear like they are planning on de-escalating or using this as an excuse to save face and avoid a retaliatory response whatsoever. So it's just incredibly dark. And basically, this is the latest provocations that we described, the target and assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the attacks on Hezbollah, assassination of Nasrallah. There was also a top IRGC commander who was killed in those strikes as well. Those are just the most recent provocations, but Bibi has been spoiling for this fight the whole time. And the previous strikes in April from Iran, those were closely basically coordinated with the U.S. There was a heads up given through these back channels. The types of, they used, older missiles and drones that could be more easily detected. It was of a different scale. It was intentionally designed, it appears, to save some face, but not really do a lot of significant damage. This is Iran finally somewhat giving Bibi what he wants, because they were faced with the prospect of, okay, so it looks like it doesn't matter whether we attack Israel or not. They're going to attack us. So we can either just sit back and take that, or we can go out and try to do something and try to save some face in advance after these, extraordinary provocations. And so after all of this time, this is Iran basically giving Bibi what he wants that will give him the chips to work with to, get his bigger war and get the U.S. on board and all of this. I was thinking on the way over here, it sort of reminds me of the rope-a-dope strategy that Kamala deployed so effectively against Donald Trump in the last debate. It's also predictable.
It's almost theater.
How many times have we been warning that this is where things, you know, we're smart people, but we're not geniuses.
And we don't have access to Israeli communications.
Internal intelligence and whatever. And it's don't you see what he wants? Don't you see where this is heading? And I don't know what the answer is. Either they're the dumbest people on earth or they're just incredibly evil, and I'm really not sure. Maybe both.
This is a project. This is what they want. This is what Bibi wants. He knows that if they strike Iranian nuclear facility or if they kill the Ayatollah, there is a 100% chance of full-blown U.S. involvement in the war. It's impossible. It's quite so. All you have to do is get things to that level.
Yeah.
And now you're not fighting. And then, by the way, those bombs, where do you think they're all coming from? Now, when we're in it together, and then the American people, everything. Look, the other thing I've really come to realize is not only are people not following this, but the level of propaganda is wild. So I watched all three networks immediately on Fox. The very first thing you hear is we need regime change. This is all Biden's fault. We need regime change. This is all Biden's fault. We need to have a full-blown war. They didn't have a single guest on that didn't say that. I don't have CNN through the plan or whatever.
I was watching CNN.
Okay, so I'll rely on you two. On MSNBC, it was the same. It's even Ehud Omer, the liberal former Israeli PM, regime change. We need regime change in Iran. I'm watching this being look, the boomers who control all of our lives, they believe this shit. They will back a war with Iran. It will be like Iraq. Again, we will need 3 years of the disaster. The boomers will buy it hook, line, and sinker until tens of thousands of Americans and others are either wounded or killed, and then eventually people are like, well, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea.
This is potentially so much worse than Iraq. Just today,
it would be worse than Iraq.
Jake Sullivan, Jake Sullivan posted a victory lap about the Biden administration's foreign policy. It was sort of just like how last year Jake Sullivan was talking about how the Middle East has never been this peaceful a week before October 7th. Today, he publishes this long essay in Foreign Affairs about how successful, I'm sorry, this is Blinken, not Jake Sullivan. Yeah, Blinken publishes this long essay in Foreign Affairs about how successful the Biden administration foreign policy has been. One of his points was literally that the relationship between the BRICS countries is superficial. It's not as rooted as a lot of people say it is, and the Biden administration is handling all of this. That is quite a bet to take in a situation like this where you're absolutely right. We are pulled into it no matter what. And we are currently, there's a kinetic war between our ally that we are funding and Russia. I mean, this is insane levels of geopolitical fragility. And A, we don't know where the commander-in-chief is. And B, that should terrify everyone because in recent days, the U.S. has not had a heads up about Nasrallah, the strike. They were not told in advance about the pagers. And I'm whatever you think about that, the point is we are funding this war that has all of these different implications geopolitically. We are supporting this war, backing it on the international stage, and it's basically out of Biden's control.
The other,
not that it's not his fault for how it's escalated, but does anyone have confidence that he's being listened to?
The irony too, I keep thinking about is everyone always said, "Oh, well, we got to fund Ukraine so that China doesn't invade Taiwan." We got to fund Israel so that China doesn't invade Taiwan. If America gets itself involved in 2 ground wars and is bogged down in selling weapons, what do you think the best possible timing to invade Taiwan is?
Well,
if you actually care, when the U.S. Navy is shooting down, spending $100 million in one day, $1 billion in a single day. Last time around, using all of our production facilities, and the only actual country that matters to the United States will actually get taken out. This is the illogic of all of their arguments of this whole de-escalate through escalation.
Right.
What a nonsense!
It's going really well. That plan's going really well.
Especially with Biden. I mean, we have to linger. He's cooked. His brain is gone. 100%. Whatever is left there is just he's just I'm a Zionist. It's that's all we get from it. And we get slept walk. I don't even know if it's slept walk, like I said. I think it was an evil.
I don't really give a fuck about what Soccer has to say about the rest of that.
made myself number one. Now I'm roasting under blazing sun, riding shotgun. You at the wheel, my free will at your direction. Memorize your signs, but forgot my own reflection.
Hey, fuzzy numbers.
I gave them all to you. Still hungry after fables, but I ran out of spoons. Give her more than I can give. Overextending my wings. Good at playing your games, but this is not a win-win. I've been sinking in your dirty dishes, even when my plate's full. I marry myself, I remain faithful. One day I'll leave the table, cause you stop serving love. Crave the taste of solitude, I know it is enough. I'm blue. The color of my solitude. Ooh, I'm blue. I'ma choose to love me over you. I've lost count of how many times I knew my yes was a no. I'm your clown out of habit, there is dust on my throne. For you I drop my shit just to hear you say hero. Fly you to your dreams, distract me from my own. Maybe baby someday I will learn to be alone.
Did you get some sleep?
The moon and build a gate around my zone. I must admit that I am selfish when I take care of myself. Repeat it till I hear it, reverse the trauma in myself. Blue, ooh, the color of my solitude. To love me over you, I'ma choose to love me over you, over you. You are not a burden, baby. You are on purpose, baby. You are not a burden, baby. You are on purpose. Yeah, you are on purpose.
Israel has started a ground invasion into Lebanon with approval from the Biden-Harris administration. This is following an intense bombing campaign by Israeli authorities against Lebanon, killing hundreds of civilians and leaving thousands injured. Hezbollah, the militant group Israel claims it's targeting, has been engaged in cross-border exchange with the Israeli military over the last year, primarily hitting military targets. This is a defensible military action considering they are trying to prevent a full-scale genocide in Gaza. Joining me now to discuss is Seamus Malakofsali. Seamus, thank you so much for coming on the Empire Files.
It's a pleasure.
So I'm happy that you're out of Beirut safely.
Encouraging people
a lot of people are still
always.
trapped
Hello.
there. The State Department has said that if you're stuck there and if you're an American, too bad. Meanwhile, they're shelling out, I don't know, 7 to 10 grand to fly Americans home from Israel.
Yeah, I mean, after October 7th, I want to say around 5 days after October 7th, the State Department was setting up charter flights for Israelis to get out of Israel, American citizens.
Their name is Kim Mortal?
Despite the fact that Ben Gurion Airport was still very much functioning. But for Lebanon, if you were an American who was in Lebanon, if you were one of the many Lebanese people who are American citizens, the State Department essentially said, well, we can give you a loan that you will eventually have to pay back if you want to leave. But otherwise, we're just going to say you should get out, and then we're going to leave this warning there for maybe 11 months. No guarantee of evacuation, no real effort on their parts, and now when it seems like the Israelis are moving
Hi, certified boy lover, she, they. Thanks for following.
Get out on the next available
Benny.gay rated your channel with 129 viewers.
Benny Ray. right, let's fucking
know, you
go.
could go on
Whoa, let's fucking go. All right, what's good, everyone? Hi. Welcome, welcome. Shout out to Benny. Everyone, please give Benny.gay a follow here on Twitch and everywhere, because she's hot and amazing, and you should do it. Do it. Do it. What's up, guys? I'm Adrienne Vixen. I use they, them pronouns. I am non-binary, queer, autistic, disabled, variety streamer. I cover leftist news and politics and shit that I find interesting. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I don't know if Benny talked about it at all, but like, you know, she definitely got an honorable mention in the Substack. So I'd be happy to link it if you want to check it out. But yeah, we covered that a couple hours ago. Real intense fucking Anna's transphobic liberal bullshit. So that was fun. Now we're just starting this piece from Empire Files. So y'all picked a good time to raid in, because this is just getting started, and but for context, this was filmed or recorded right before Iran launched its retaliatory strike. So this is focusing more on the she's really in the like enlightened centrist, like the title of it is like unaligned and so, like unburdened. No, it's not unburdened, I'm kidding. I am too, like I'm still like kind of like tense about it, so I feel you, YB. Let me grab it. What did I do with all that nonsense? Oh, it's still up here. Independent and unaligned. And yeah, she goes through like how she was so biased against the right, and then her evolution started because she was assaulted by a homeless man and then received so much hate from the left. And like that's not what happened. And then, you know, oh my god, the meltdowns about my tweets, and then how all the so-called self-described socialists took it upon themselves to profit from conflict by publicly attacking me with monetized videos. And then to say the most unhinged outcome of the debacle was that TYT's YouTube chat moderators quit over the tweet, which is not true. Someone reported me to Human Resources, and an on-air transgender contributor even resigned from the company after being urged by online mobs and leftist shows to do so. Yeah, because Benny has no agency, and she couldn't have possibly just thought that she didn't want to work for a transphobic right-wing organization. So yeah, this is a, you know, it is kind of a why I left the left, because she's opening up the Substack called Unaligned, saying I am not with any, like I am not on the left. She's basically claiming a centrist Hi, Benny. Maybe. Yeah, so we did a little breakdown. You did definitely get an honorable mention. But yeah, she released this Substack a few like 2 days ago. And so we went through it to see which, and I'm like, girl, you're still on about your fucking birthing person tweet saying I'm never gonna apologize for this. And I'm like, we didn't quit over your tweet, Anna. Like, there was so much. And I'm like, the mods wrote like a 8-paragraph fucking essay for you about why we were resigning. But no, it was because of this tweet. And yeah, again, taking away any agency from trans people because she doesn't, it's like, she dehumanizes trans people. She doesn't think trans people should have rights. She doesn't think trans people are people, essentially. Right, like, AC makes a good point. If you're referring to others as, quote, the left, then you might not be on the left. Carla says, Anna, it's okay, honey. I'll never watch you again either. We'll get through this. Yeah, that's, they ruined it. Yes. Yeah. With the the intolerance on the left, basically she said like she only assumed that she would ever be criticized from the right. Is essentially what this is. Like, she never thought that she would be criticized, like, from the left. And when she came out with problematic statements, viewpoints, pushing misinformation on her large-ass platform, she got pushback from the left, and then she lost her fucking mind about it. Like, that's what happened, Anna. I was there. All right. Yeah, so there's a YouTube VOD, and I'm probably gonna try to edit it and make a YouTube video with some of the commentary and stuff if I have the spoons. I hate editing. And we have been streaming for 9.5 hours. Let's fucking go. So, after we get through this, we'll probably end up rating somebody else. I noticed a couple people aren't online today, so my numbers are higher, which is cool. Thanks for being here, everyone. All right, so barreling towards World War III with Israeli well, looks like we have an editor. Kidding. Love Abby Martin. She gives really great analysis. And like I wanted to emphasize, this was recorded prior to, actually I might save this for later because it's like an hour. Hold on, guys, I'm sorry. Let me just entertain you with something. Here, like, let me give you something while I get my shit together. Also, how can you quit when you were not being paid? What would you consider leaving a volunteer position? And also, weren't you here for the part where I explained how they literally never told me it was an unpaid job?
Yeah, I started this rap shit as a joke. So why is that I spit harder than what you man call serious flow? You're serious, soft like yolk. My unserious pop like smoke. One a bar on TikTok got more likes than your whole career did like bro. Oh dear, oh no. How many times in ends did I open grind to find your boyfriend on road? Too many man that's known on road. Download that blowing up a girl phone. Fast words with numerous ups that's moving. Got visual and snow, but be my bag is coke on the only load. Where bro be licking out blood. And it's hot time me, oh. Fake bitches sayonara lower. Every time the lights are fighting, beating Tim, I got a hard flow. Fuck a feature, make it on my own. Pattern a scene for the transphobes, and I'll do it quick. Cause from 2 TikToks, I got lyrics for the girl them know that. Asian Chinese, 6-inch cocoa, got it strappy. No pump on my soul, got bodies, call me, said cheeks so clappy. Then like some fish that's scampi, was a pain blind out. I'm a whole bad team, no wise to score some of my team, cause we better, I know we done it, no funny. Yeah, so acky, so fish and acky, step in a rave and a rainbow body spray. Love her, Matty gang me, always gaggy, will bang you up like an Asian granny. Yeah, aggy like a posh yaggy who's pressed, cause she can't find a backy. Like, where's your ops? No, you man soft. Half you goons is choosing, doing up roads, so capping yourself. Your life's more dead than your flows, your family's best, that's why you want ups. But I didn't even choose no beef or one, I just get cropped. Yo, I was outside, some up, they called me a faggot. So in my 6-inch shows, yeah, I looked down, a man and said back it. He turned to his mates, I back out the blade, that's when he dashed like a rabbit. Like a little bitch, he did it dip, then he licked the only sad battles. But Tran in the UK is a stay on a drill beat, that's a game changer. You man are in danger, I like to play dumb boy pagan, and I'm losing patience. Civil transphobic skaters, raiders, gamers on the low, chasers, faceless haters, making me famous. Layla, keyboard warrior, say it to my face, and all you do is sit on your phone and cry about trans gods complaining. Transfer mixes, Asian trailblazer, man, them lip at his beach, you won't change her. Gracings wanna be me, their makeup looking like Ollie Londoners faker. I ain't here for the fake shit, not the fame, the paper or clout. I just make these waves for the dolls and nobody fucking else. I'm down to be chasers, boohoo, basic bitches, why the fuck you so loud? You young and queen, just beat her princess, less than heroes, I wear the crown. Get me vexy, get down, test me bestie or suddenly, all the way down from the tongue to the ground like Chairman Mao. And me and your girlfriend out, said I'm trans and I'm proud, say it loud, it's to announce, trans rights right fucking now, Princess Susu signing out.
So, again, this is just a remix. I don't think we need to do anything crazy with the beat. I think, realistically, if we just keep the bass where it's at, keep the flutes where it's at, might want to rearrange the bridge a little bit, but as soon as that bass hits, I just hit him with that. I grew some titties on my chest, but y'all still be double checking. Leave the message undelivered, but they still be double texting. Triple double up a little rubber pussy in a puddle. Then I just stick the tip in and she begging for the double take. Tell me how a single song make me up and run away. See, they fucking love to hate till I muscle up in another state. When I see that number, bitch, I always double take. Cause none of them say.
Everywhere I go, them niggas be like, that's my baby. Cause he bitches love me, cause I'm chasing goals. I shoot my shot at bucket. Don't get mad, cause I'm playing house with your BM. I woke up like this nigga, I caught my shit from AM to PM. Got the dicky, got the blicky, cause my hometown crazy. Got my hair locked up like I'm Weezy F, baby. I'm coming to fuck shit up. Yeah, let's leave it go crazy. I've been doing this shit since like 13. That's why I'm your bitch favorite. Okay.
Hold up, wait. Everywhere I go, it goes like
Double take, over slice, another great. Yo, got the ladies coming over, it's gon' fun, okay. Love that face, she says to settle things. Diamond dancing, black queen on my arm, and she double caked up on a Tuesday. Yeah, they get the fake and bring the then it's doomsday. Please do not mistake it, shut the fuck up, cause you too fake. You don't wanna make me go. Got Swayze though. Ooh, you can't take my hoes, these garden tools replaceable. Ooh, what they hate me for is funny, cause I stay for show. Every time I'm passing by, they breaking necks to catch the whole glimpse of the fit. Ain't no wash on the wrist. Got their hands to Ducati when she clock in the sink. I'm the prince in Bugatti, tell the cops they can kiss my ass when I pass, cause they not finna get no double take.
Girly big stepper in the size 12. Just to ride around pushing gas like a fire sale. Now I'm online, still supplying to my clientele. Big smile, tell my haters I'm alive and well. Yeah, and tell little mama that she fine as hell. Your man said that he rap, I can hardly tell. Pound for pound, bar for bar, round for round, beat your ass at 159. Get you saved by the bell. Please don't be so jealous. Tell them evangelicals need to eat some edibles. Vegan, keto, it can be whatever though. Tell them if they really want me, they can come and get me. I don't go quietly and it won't go quickly. Got a big knife and I might chop a dick. She's free like a mason, walk the line like Dixie. Chicks all betwixt sending tits like pick me. Bitch, my existence is kismet. Granny Smith shape of the ass, you can kiss that. You felt some type of way when I passed and you pissed at it. We getting attacked, but the masses give a shit about it. These kids dying in class, but my strap is forget about it. These stocks been the collapse because my tax is getting dicked around with. Tell me how the military fucking fails or auto, but still got all of our budget. Tell me why TurboTax is we got auto deposit. Tell me why the stage got higher when I climb out of the closet. And tell me why I'll lose my job if I put color on my eyelids, or where these rappers got their pride when they ain't sliding the slightest. Tell me how the fucking genre sleeping on me like Biden. Better know that 3 of fucking goddess, y'all go suck on my tridents. Damage, bitch. Hold up. She put a limit on my love. I can't listen well enough. Now I'm sipping from this cup like she's keeping distance now.
Lady, how's it going?
But it's tough, baby, when we make it love. She put a limit on my love. She put a limit on my love.
Doing okay. I'm getting a little tired, but like not, you know.
Come get sun kissed from this beach bum. Just flow with me, come on and be the leaf. Mix a little Aries with a thick ass Libra. See, I know that, but the rhyme scheme is way more important. Cause it amplifies my line, but the message is distorted. That's a whole different story. Talk about your feelings, that's a whole different Oreo. I talk a lot of shit, but my listening is horrible. It's piss poor, I get bored.
Hey,
About me, you been moving your mouth, and I've been thinking like, can't we just kiss me? You a tall glass of water, I've been looking for something to sip on. I've been looking worldwide, even hollered at Pitbull. Trying to get more time than is currently allotted for a part-time job. Worshiping on your vagina, do I got a lot of drive? Well, sorta, kinda. Goated and I'm white, but I'm not Armani. Claim to know everything, but I'm not Hermione. See, your tolerance for all of this is kinda tiny. Put up boundaries, might as well tell me that I'm dying. She put a limit on my love. I can't listen well enough. Now I'm sipping from this cup like she's keeping distance. Now I'm fucked. Keep my interest, but it's tough, baby, when we linking up. She put a limit on my love.
Hey Nina, welcome in.
She put a limit on my love.
She likes it, I'm quick with it. I'm quick with it, and I'm interested in the way she is. She just bit a lip, and pop goes the bubble she's been living in. Yeah. But this started as a kid, pulling from deep within. Home life, roller coaster craziness, moving out and in again. Tears and rays on my unmedicated Donnie Darko shit. How I move in pursuit of her happiness. I move my lips so passionate. She wanna give a lick, always reading into it. I step upon the pedestal. She's willing to go to the precipice. I'm here for the love, but they don't commit, so I'm the only one to take the risk. She is the audience. I preach like an activist. Now I jump off the cliff. Don't knock on my door, I'm not staying up. A little short of itty rather, you're not paying up. Been feeling kinda stuck, I'm aiming high above. I'm turning to the sun, I put a limit on my love.
She put a limit on my love. I can't listen well enough. Now I'm sipping from this cup like she's keeping distance. Now I'm fucked. Keep my interest, but it's tough, baby, when we linking up.
be right back.
From this club light, she's keeping distance. Now I'm fucked. Keep my interest, but it's tough, baby, when we linking up.
I will always question those in power and those making decisions over other people.
Are you gay? Well, no you're not. You'll never be gay enough. You touched a man once. You kissed a friend on the lips as a child, as part of a bet, and now you're forever tainted with the mortal sin of being straight. Sorry, gay, or should I say straight, but the only real gays, the only true gays, are those who I personally decide are gay. And you, madam, have a severely heterosexual aura, unlike my lesbian queen, Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, famous lesbian. Yes, she's only ever dated men as far as you know. And yes, she is perfectly happy apparently in a current relationship with Travis Kelce as far as you know. But she is a lesbian. The clues are all over the place. Her never saying she's a lesbian, for example. Her exclusively dating men, for another. It's all there. And I have a theory that I think you'll agree with because, let's be honest, everyone knows I'm right about everything. That Travis Kelce is actually a stone butch. Yeah. Breathe it in. That's right, Swifties. I've finally proven once and for all that Taylor Swift is definitely a lesbian. Unlike those fake celebrity gays who only act like lesbians for the attention, like, you know, Chapel Roan. Only a straight woman would proudly and repeatedly call herself a lesbian, wave the lesbian flag on stage, make songs about being a lesbian, and ingratiate herself into the queer community. I'm sorry, Chapel Roan, if that is your real name, but a real lesbian would never be open about being a lesbian. No, not because it's something that you should be ashamed of. Wait, come back! I have a manifesto about all the references to cunnilingus and Nevermore. Wait! Hello there, fake lesbians and gala truthers. My name is Bridget Empire, science and culture correspondent for the only newspaper in Britain that has the scoop on who is and who isn't a real lesbian
Raven,
in the year of our Lord 2024.
I know,
as a British newspaper,
like, so she has openly said in interviews that she has had relationships with both men and women. So I would call her queer. But I think there is some evidence that she identifies as a lesbian, but I don't know for sure. That's kind of why I'm watching this. Because I watched another video a few months back that was like, just kind of like, we have to talk about what's going on with Chapel Roan and like the sapphic explosion of Chapel Roan and others. I don't remember. And this girl was like very adamant that Chapel Roan was a lesbian and saying anything else was problematic. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, if that's how she identifies. And it's super weird to me, like, as a queer person, like this topic is really weird to me. Like, well, is she only a lesbian? Like, maybe. I don't, it's super weird. It's super weird. Is she lesbian? Is she queer? Is she bi? Is she pan? I don't know. I have no fucking clue. I'm not Chapel Roan. Yeah, like, she's definitely queer. Why do we have to, like, pin it down? You know, it's a weird conversation. Hey, Zeus. Yeah, so it's kind
If
of
you like dog shit content,
Aw.
please subscribe.
Thanks for the follow. Yeah, like, I mean, if she, you know, like, and also, like, can't your sexuality be fluid? You know, like, can't you change the way you identify as your sexual preferences? Exactly, Carla. I just always hear people call her a lesbian. I mean, it's cool. If she is, it's cool. I still have a chance. If she's bi, then cool. I still have a chance. And saying in person, is queer baiting is also annoying. Like, can't people experiment? Yeah. I feel like okay, so like if it's like Katy Perry's like I Kissed a Girl is a good example of queer baiting because she's like straight as fuck and a Republican, you know, so I would call that like a good example of queer baiting. But like people will say like Billie Eilish is queer baiting, and I'm like, she literally tweets about eating pussy. Jinx. Yeah, Katy Perry is like, I don't know that she's like a hardcore right winger, but she's a Republican. Share a brain cell. Raven Payne, hell yeah, in the running, just my type. I can't play any Chapel Roan because I'm streaming to YouTube, so I would immediately get clamped. I mean, I probably wouldn't have like a year ago. Yeah, Billie Eilish put out a tweet when she canceled her tour. Like, she's like, tours or a post, I don't know where she put it, but like, you know, like, tour is canceled. I need to, like, what did she say? She's like, I'm gonna travel and eat no. She said, I'm gonna do something and eat pussy. I'll tour when I feel like it. Yeah, she was like, tour is canceled. I'm gonna go eat some pussy. I'll tour when I feel like it. I'm like, yeah, legend status. Raven, I did see about the Cybertrucks. We might do that. We'll see how I'm feeling. Oh, Zeus, if you put the LUL emote, the LUL emote, it will get auto-modded. So it could be that. But yeah. Didn't put that email, I put an LB emote. Interesting. I wonder, yeah. So there's a petition to change the LOL emote because it's a Gamergate guy and it's like a transphobic kind of sexist person. Geodragon says, I thought I saw an interview where Katy Perry said she was bi. I guess she went back on that. I have never seen that. So I could be mistaken. I could be giving you guys wrong information about Katy Perry. But like, the fact that she is now in a party that hurts queer people, like, you don't get to sit with us. Yeah, Omega Lol is fine. Hey, what's up, Easel Cat? Yeah, I know. We're doing okay. We're doing okay. It's been a long one. But it's been good. Raven. Raven says, as many people who use bisexual lighting yet aren't bi, it's hard to tell these days. I, for one, find it an outrage. Don't put bi lighting if you're not bi. People change. Yeah, sometimes better, sometimes worse. Yeah, that's a good point, Geodragon, for sure. That's a good point. Like I said earlier, sexuality can be fluid. Stolen by lighting valor. Let's go. You're not a queer, I mean, cool table. Love it. Okay. Let's dive into this. I figured this would be a little bit more pleasant to talk about than World War III. You know?
I'm sorry, Chapel Roan, if that is your real name, but a real lesbian would never be open about being a lesbian. No, not because it's something that you should be ashamed of. Wait, come back! I have a manifesto about all the references to cunnilingus and Nevermore. Wait! Hello there, fake lesbians and gala truthers. My name is Bridget Empire, science and culture correspondent for the only newspaper in Britain that has the scoop on who is and who isn't a real lesbian in the year of our Lord 2024, the Daily Telegraph. As a British newspaper, it is up to us to hound any and every woman in the public eye into either depression or into an isolated tunnel in France with no cameras. God save the Queen. As such, we have been closely watching the efforts to shame Chapel Roan, Midwest princess, sleeper sensation, and gay icon of the pop music scene,
I definitely
into a
need
mental
a
breakdown for the crime of setting boundaries with her audience and being open about how isolating and terrifying fame can be. For these crimes, Chapel has, of course, been sentenced to public shame, personal attacks, accusations of being ungrateful or horrible to her fans, and even, in the most utterly depraved corners of social media, having her very identity be stolen from her. Because if you will not exist as a spectacle, an object for the public's amusement, if you will not abandon your personhood and become the circus, you do not get to decide who you are. You are not a human being. You are an object to be bought and sold. You are a spectacle False choice in spectacular abundance. A choice which lies in the juxtaposition of competing and complementary spectacles, and also in the juxtaposition of roles, signified and carried mainly by things which are at once exclusive and overlapping, develops into a struggle of vaporous qualities meant to stimulate loyalty to quantitative triviality. This resurrects false archaic oppositions, regionalisms and racisms, which serve to raise the vulgar hierarchic ranks of consumption to a preposterous ontological superiority. In this way, the endless series of trivial confrontations is set up again. From competitive sports to elections, mobilizing a sub-lucid interest. Wherever there is abundant consumption, a major spectacular opposition between youth and adults comes to the fore amongst the false roles. False because the adult, master of his life, does not exist, and because youth, the transformation of what exists, is in no way the property of those who are now young, but of the economic system, of the dynamic of capitalism. Things rule and are young. Things confront and replace one another. Why do we feel like Chapel Roan does not belong to herself, but to the public? Do we see her as a spectacle, which is to say, as a commodity, to be accessed with money and attention, rather than as a person, for whom consent must be freely given, in order for us to get what many in society believe they are owed just for giving her their time and their dollars?
This is quite overwhelming and quite scary. I think for someone who gets a lot of anxiety around people yelling at you, the carpet is horrifying. Yeah. And I yelled back.
Chapel, the front of the dress, please. Chapel, turn towards us.
Not me. Chapel. I yelled back. You don't get to yell at me like that.
This is not new. Many before Chapel Roan have buckled under the weight of fame and the stripping of personhood that comes with a record company turning you from a human being into a product to be sold. Some did not survive. Kurt Cobain famously struggled with fame, hated being a spectacle, an idol, something his punk roots instinctively bristled against. He did not survive. Many take drugs to cope. Cobain, of course, but others too met their end abusing drugs. The lifestyle of constant touring, no privacy, constant attention, being too much for any human being to cope with. Jimi Hendrix, Amy Winehouse, on and on it goes.
I haven't felt the excitement of listening to as well as creating music, along with really writing something for too many years now. I feel guilty beyond words about these things. For example, when we're backstage and the lights go out and the manic roar of the crowd begins, it doesn't affect me the way in which it did for Freddie Mercury, who seemed to love and relish in the love and adoration from the crowd. Well, Kurt, so f***ing what? Then don't be a rock star, you ass. Which is something I totally admire and envy. The fact is, I can't fool you, any one of you. It simply isn't fair to you or to me. The worst crime I can think of would be to pull people off by faking it and pretending as if I'm having 100% fun. No, Kurt, the worst crime I can think of is for you to just continue being a rock star when you hate it and just stop. Sometimes I feel as I should have a punch-in time clock before I walk out on stage. I've tried everything within my power to appreciate it, and I do. God, believe me, I do, but it's not enough.
And yet, after all this, with all these bodies in its wake, nothing changes. The record companies rake in the money from turning people into products, and we forget the existential horror of the transformation of these artists from human beings into things to be stacked on shelves, bought and sold, to be made property, if only in the abstract. And yet we all know, don't we, that this is wrong?
And how fucking dare anyone out there make fun of Britney after all she's been through? She lost her aunt. She went through a divorce. She had 2 fucking kids. Her husband turned out to be a user, a cheater, and now she's going through a custody battle. All you people care about is readers and making money off of her. She's a human! What you don't realize is that Britney's making you all this money and all you do is write a bunch of crap about her. She hasn't performed on stage in years. Leave Britney alone! Please.
In 2007, Cara Cunningham, unfortunately known widely by her dead name with which she made her fame, posted a video to the primordial soup of early YouTube, one of the first of its kind, and one of the first to go truly viral. It was, of course, titled, "Leave Britney Alone." While at the time this video was shared and mocked for being ridiculous, I think a lot of us who didn't understand the sentiment at the time get it now in retrospect. Britney Spears was famously hounded by the press everywhere she went. She had partners turn against her, those she trusted most, from Justin Timberlake to former paparazzos, selling stories insulting her to the press, who would in turn follow her everywhere she went in public, snapping pictures and demanding she defend herself for the crimes they'd invented about her. The gossip press did not leave her alone, and they sent her spiraling, culminating, in the eyes of the press at the time, in her shaving her head, which she did in protest of this very behaviour, but which the press responded to by trying to turn her into a global laughingstock. Behind the scenes, she had been betrayed by the vast majority of the people in her personal life, and in the most on-the-nose expression of turning the artist into a commodity, her very freedom was taken away when a court put her under a conservatorship. For 14 years, Britney's life was controlled entirely by her abusive father, by order of state court. He controlled her life, her career, her relationships, and all of her money. Only after calls to free Britney went viral during the pandemic did most of us realize just how bad the situation was. Britney Spears had been denied her personhood for almost a decade and a half. Meanwhile, she was still bought and sold. Her image, her voice, what she represented, free to be exploited to line the pockets of millionaire record executives and her villain of a father, while she, Britney Spears the human being, was imprisoned, forced to put a smile on her face, made to sing and dance for those who took her freedom. It's not a news story, but it's one that many people thought was behind us in the 21st century. But the mechanisms that fuel the transformation of human beings into commodities is still in place, and sometimes they find ways to express themselves in similar ways, even if its most overt and most inhumane atrocities were abolished. Except in prisons. Look at the 13th Amendment. Cara Cunningham herself had a different sort of journey. Her fame trapped her in her own less acute version of the story of her idol. Shamed for her androgynous appearance and identity, she was pressured by her community both in real life and on the internet where she was now famous. And as many trans women do, she gave in to the pressure to become strong, to look masculine, to go as far from female as possible. And people praised her for it. Oh my god, she finally looks healthy. You know how it goes. For not being who she truly was. For conforming to their ideas of what a gay person should look like. She would eventually transition around the same time as a judge demanded that Britney Spears' conservatorship be ended. What hides under spectacular oppositions is a unit of misery. Behind the masks of total choice, different forms of the same alienation confront each other, all of them built on real contradictions which are repressed. The spectacle exists in a concentrated or a diffuse form, depending on the necessities of the particular stage of misery which it denies and supports. In both cases, the spectacle is nothing more than an image of happy unification, surrounded by desolation and fear at the tranquil center of misery. Despite being perceived as somewhat of an overnight sensation, Chappell Roan, born Kaylee Rose Amschultz, was signed to Atlantic Records almost a decade ago in 2015. Even her debut album and certified banger, Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess, came out in 2023, and it was only 6 months later that her exponential rise would begin, starting with her touring with Olivia Rodrigo and appearing on both Stephen Colbert and NPR's Tiny Desk concert when many of us saw her for the first time. Her rise has been a pretty damning case study in what fame does to a person. For a decade she'd been performing, even signed to a major label, as a musical artist. She was pretty popular on TikTok too, and had a cult following for her music. And within a few months, she went from a darling of a small but passionate community to one of the biggest pop stars in the entire world. And she's been very frank about what that's felt like.
I don't care that abuse and harassment, stalking, whatever, is a normal thing to do to people who are famous or a little famous, whatever. I don't care that it's normal. I don't care that this crazy type of behavior comes along with the job, the career field I've chosen. That does not make it okay. That doesn't make it normal. It doesn't mean I want it. It doesn't mean that I like it. I don't want whatever the fuck you think you're supposed to be entitled to whenever you see a celebrity. I don't give a fuck if you think it's selfish of me to say no for a photo or for your time or for a hug. That's not normal. That's weird. It's weird how people think that you know a person just because you see them online or you listen to the art they make. That's fucking weird. I'm allowed to say no to creepy behavior, okay?
I miss just like walking around being like by myself. I guess being by myself is what I miss.
I just feel a little off today because I think that my career has just kind of gone really fast and it's really hard to keep up. And so just being honest that I'm just having a hard time today. I'm not trying to like give you like a lesser show. It's just like there's a lot on my mind. That's all. I need you to answer questions. Just answer my questions for a second. If you saw a random woman on the street, would you yell at her from the car window? Would you harass her in public? Would you go up to a random lady and say, "Can I get a photo with you?" And she's like, "No, what the fuck?" And then you get mad at this random lady? Would you be offended if she says no to your time because she has her own time? Would you stalk her family? Would you follow her around? Would you try to dissect her life and bully her online? This is a lady you don't know. And she doesn't know you at all. Would you assume that she's a good person? Assume she's a bad person? Would you assume everything you read about her online is true? I'm a random bitch. You're a random bitch. Just think about that for a second, okay?
Many people obviously didn't react well to these words. To people who've absorbed the mentality that women in the public eye are commodities and not people, it's intolerable to be told that you cannot buy their time, their attention, their love with your money. It's intolerable to be confronted with the fact that you require their consent to interact with them. And yet, while people get increasingly agitated about someone whose music they appreciate setting boundaries, as if a slight has been made against them personally by demanding they be treated as a human being instead of a piece of art or, God forbid, a can of food on a shelf to be bought and consumed, Chapel Roan has, in her own words, had people follow her, find out where her parents live, where her sister works, actively putting her family at risk because they believe they are owed her attention. They bought Chapel Roan, the commodity, and they cannot accept that there is a real human being behind that stage name.
People start to be freaks.
Yeah, they
follow
get real.
me.
Yeah, they follow
and
you
like
around.
follow like know where my parents live and like my sister, where's my sister works, like all this weird.
No bueno, not happening.
This is the time when I was like a few years ago that I said if stalker vibes, like family was in danger, is when I would quit. And like we're
Me
there.
too, same.
We're there.
More recently, Chapel Roan has been open about her feelings that fame is abusive. The vibe of this? Stalking, talking shit online, people who won't leave you alone, yelling at you in public, is the vibe of an abusive ex-husband. That's what it feels like. I didn't know it would feel this bad. The Kaylee side of her still craves the idol of anonymity. Off hours, she's been caught by fans practicing somersaults in Central Park and racing shopping carts on IKEA, but such bursts of spontaneity are getting rarer. These days, she almost always has to wear a wig in public. She even had to let her therapist go after realizing they were no longer equipped to deal with her rapidly accelerating fame. And it's getting scary, actually. There are now paps, scalpers, and obsessives who buy plane tickets just so they can wait at the gate for where she lands. For every unicorn of a young star with the power to command gigawatts of attention, there's a seedy microeconomy sprouting around and glomming on. Take, for example, a recent encounter at the airport. I get out of the car. It's 5:30 in the morning, and there's two guys waiting with a bunch of posters and shit for me to sign. Chapel says, her voice tightening again.
Hey, welcome
I know they're not
back,
fans.
YouTubers.
I said no. I was like, I don't sign anything at the airport. I'm sorry. One of them follows me to the TSA lines, starts yelling at me, and everyone just turns and looks. He's like, you should really humble yourself. Do you know where you are right now? Don't forget where you came from. I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? I told myself, if this ever gets dangerous, I might quit. It's dangerous now, and I'm still going, but that part is not what I signed up for. Chapel is right to be concerned. This is the same monster that has driven many before her to depression, to substance abuse, and worse. If we are to believe his diaries, this is part of what drove Kurt Cobain over the edge. Part of what made Britney Spears a slave to her own father, because she dared to react in kind to the abuse she received. And beyond the people we talk about all the time in these stories, those whose names are practically legend, there are more still that we don't talk about, who didn't survive the unwilling transformation from human into spectacle, into commodity. Christina Grimmie was a singer who'd made her fame on YouTube and competed in the reality competition show The Voice. One fan of hers, Kevin Loibel, had, over the course of a few years, become obsessed with Christina. According to a friend, he watched her videos all day. He got surgery, teeth whitening, hair implants, and lost weight in anticipation of meeting Christina, who he was convinced would agree to a relationship with him. When confronted about how unrealistic this was, he broke off all contact with the friend who gave this information. He had consumed as much of Christina Grimmie the commodity as perhaps anyone in history. But he only knew her as a product. He had no regard for the feelings or autonomy of Christina Grimmie the person, someone he did not know, who did not owe him anything for the attention he'd given. He had not bought a human being, but she was no human being to him. She was a corporate product, and by giving her the most attention he could, he'd bought her. Now he wanted to take her home. In a meet and greet after one of her shows in Orlando in 2016, Loibel shot Christina 3 times before taking his own life. Every given commodity fights for itself, cannot acknowledge the others, and attempts to impose itself everywhere as if it were the only one. The spectacle, then, is the epic poem of the struggle, an epic which cannot be concluded by the fall of any Troy. The spectacle does not sing the praises of men and their weapons, but of commodities and their passions. In this blind struggle, every commodity, pursuing its passion, unconsciously realizes something higher, the becoming world of the commodity, which is also the becoming commodity of the world. Thus, by means of a ruse of commodity logic, what's specific in the commodity wears itself out in the fight, while commodity form moves towards its absolute realization.
Welcome in, people. Hi, Schmegly. Hi, Peacefire.
Do you guys
now.
know what Gala is? For those of you that are blessedly unaware,
Hi,
there's a
Seth.
large
Hi,
fandom on the
BCat.
internet centered around QAnon-level conspiracy theories, finding clues in Taylor Swift's work, fashion, interviews, everything, that prove, apparently, that she is hinting to her fan base that she's gay, even while she publicly is very much not. Now, that is not to say that she might not come out later in life. Lots of people do. Chapel Roan, for instance.
Series,
But she's pretty
bad
vocal about being an
lefty.
ally, and for now, we should believe her that she's a straight woman until we're told
Hi,
otherwise,
friends.
because she's a human being that deserves a private life, and not a product that you have bought and now owes you every detail about everything they've
Yeah,
ever
but we
done.
can talk about it
Although,
again.
given how much she goes around in a private jet, essentially speeding up our planet's demise, I would forgive you for giving her a little less grace than most women in the public eye.
Taylor Swift just released a new song, and she's coming out.
As a lesbian?
Yes, as a lesbian.
Okay.
And she's always been.
Okay. All right.
It's called Rainbow Dress.
There is a VOD on YouTube.
Is this Taylor? She sounds bad.
Listen.
Like the vocals
Already
sound
split, but not edited.
bad. Okay, yeah, that's good.
It's her best friend.
This is straight sex. That's not so gay. It doesn't sound that gay.
I would definitely recommend checking it out because my analysis was better then than it will be if I go again. But
It's like a right-wing talking point.
If you guys aren't gonna listen,
No.
I'm gonna
Okay,
stop
no, all right.
playing it.
We'll listen.
The point is that there is a large group of Taylor Swift fans who are trying their very best to fit this presumably straight woman into a lesbian-shaped hole, because they've devoted all of their free time to bigging up Taylor Swift, and they are gay, so they need her to be gay as well, because she's not a human being with her own feelings, but instead a doll to be played with. She is not in control of her own fate, because you have bought her fate by buying tickets to her shows, streaming her music, buying her merch.
It gets me so angry. On behalf of them, I feel passionate, not gay. So I pray for them, and I say for them, we need to make a change, not gay.
There's a weird contradiction in the way fans react to Taylor Swift, which is simultaneously reminiscent of the same dehumanizing attitude people like Britney Spears received, and a kind of godlike worship. Taylor Swift must be everything, because she is a modern-day deity. You hear her everywhere. You see her everywhere. She has the power to sway elections. And if you're like me, and you're thinking, Sam, there's a really good story in there somewhere. It
He's
exists.
referring to Anna
It's called The Wicked and the
Kasparian.
Divine, and it's a comic book series by Kieran Gillen and Jamie
Duke.
McKelvey. I own all of it. As promised, not full of shit, is the entire Wicked and the Divine series. Would highly recommend, especially if you like the premise that I just described. Kieran Gillen. Follow me on Twitter. In The Wicked and the Divine, every 90 years, 12 gods are reincarnated as humans. They are loved. They are hated. In 2 years, they are dead. The series deals with the idea of celebrities as gods and all that entails. The loss of their identities, their humanity, the hero worship, the belief that you are owned by others, that you belong to them, even as you hold immense power over them. The contradiction between the public scrutiny and the absolute power. I was thinking about this series a lot in relation to the different reactions people have had to Taylor Swift not coming out as a lesbian, and Chappell Roan being very open about being a lesbian, how hard it was for her to come out, and how she still struggles with it. While Chappell Roan is giving interviews with, say, People magazine that read, according to Roan, whose real name is Kaylee Emstertz, she thought there was something wrong with her. Finally, it's like, oh, I know why. It's because I'm gay and nothing's actually wrong with me, she told the publication. I just wasn't supposed to be sleeping with men, and now I'm a little repulsed at the thought of even kissing a guy, because no one's going to be as good as girls. Roan realized she had a lot of shame around her sexuality, and had to do a lot of unlearning from her Christian upbringing. There are a set of online gays dismissing this out of hand. They do not worship Chappell Roan. They worship a different god. They worship Taylor Swift. And one such fan took to twitter.com to accuse Chappell Roan of performing the lesbian thing, while calling Taylor Swift real lesbian music. While elsewhere on that absolute shithole of a website, people are saying that Taylor Swift has proven definitively that she is a lesbian by wearing a dress that looks like Scotch tape and making references to an albatross. I don't know what this means. Like, you have a gay pop star right there. We have gays at home. But instead of just accepting that, you're harassing her because
We
she's
have
not
gays at
Taylor
home.
Swift. The Taylor Swift you've been a loyal customer of for a decade couldn't possibly not be gay because you've invested so much time in trying to mirror yourself onto her. Meanwhile, this new product has appeared on the shelf claiming to be a gay, but I'm not wasting my money on her. I've already sunk too much money into this Taylor Swift thing. Or, as this incredible Twitter account put it, she was engaged to a moid. He broke up with her, and a lot of her
Hey,
songs
Annie.
are originally about men. And I think Taylor is a lesbian, but has been forced into the closet and has been trying to signal her sexuality for a decade.
Just seems not gay, wrong, not gay, that no one seems to care. Sports.
Putting aside that Chappell has been very open about having written songs about men because she wasn't out at the time and has since come out since writing these songs, and the fact that this Twitter account, despite using it as an example, can't possibly be talking about super graphic ultra modern girl, which might as well be a song just called I Want to Date a Woman, why would you use the fact that Chappell used to date men as proof that she's not a lesbian when Taylor Swift is currently dating a man? And this whole denial of gay cards because you slept with a man once is just gold starism, which is extremely problematic and has its roots in extremely sexist attitudes of the past. A gold star lesbian, unfortunately for all those you don't know, I'm about to inform you, is a lesbian who's never slept with a man. As if no lesbians come out later in life, experiment, have one-night stands that they later regret, or that bisexual people are somehow lesser, and as if the notion of PIV being some sort of sacred act that robs a poor virginal woman of her purity and makes her a sinner forever that is laid with a beast is true?
Agreed,
As if a
Duke.
woman's
Agreed.
sexuality is defined by her proximity or relationship to penises rather than by herself. Because men do not give women agency. Women have agency in and of themselves. This centering
Yeah,
of
Lainey,
PIV
for
is
sure.
something that excludes you from the sort of VIP. Ooh, that's an interesting mirror. This centering of PIV as something that excludes you from some sort of VIP lounge in the gay bar is ridiculous and relies on the idea that heterosexual sex is inherently life-changing and sacred, as opposed, of course, to gay sex, which is somehow something entirely different and doesn't affect you spiritually at all. It fundamentally accepts the conservative idea that every adult's morality is determined by if they have had PIV and how much they have had.
I
And
have
putting a
such
gay twist
different
onto it
chats.
doesn't
This
make
is so
that idea
funny.
any less conservative, especially when it's used to gatekeep actual queer people from their communities so that you can signal your distaste for their art, as if you can deny a person access to community and culture in the same way you refuse to buy their products. Beyond the denial of Chapel Roan's queerness by queer people and other fandoms are the same social conservatives that have been obsessed with the idea that people come out as queer for the attention for decades, or even, to show their hand as conservatives, for male attention. As if the best way to get male attention is to refuse to date men. As if women can't
Talking
love women
about
unless
ass
it's in the
cancer
context of loving
and
men.
getting
As if
your
men,
man cave
again,
spelunked.
are at the center of every woman's personality, the focal point of her every decision in life. Some of these people are the same people that believe being gay is a choice, or that it's some sort of perversion or sin. Or even if they do actually believe it's for attention, they are making the same tired conservative arguments that have been around since humanity made the mistake of inventing cities instead of touching grass for a living. When I was growing up, all the people that came out as bisexual when I was a teenager
So
and were
if you
accused
need
of doing
to,
it for the
you need to get a
attention are
colonoscopy
still
at some point.
bisexual years and in fact
They put you to
decades
sleep.
later. And then you have the people who are questioning Chapel Roan's queerness because they don't agree with her politics.
Endorsing and voting are completely different. I don't agree with a lot of what is going on with, like, policies. Like, obviously, fuck the policies of the right, but also fuck some of the policies on the left. That's why I can't endorse. That's why I can't, like, put my entire name and my entire project behind one. Because there is no way I can stand behind some of the left's completely transphobic and completely idle views. So yeah, there are huge problems on both. You know what is right and wrong, and so do I. Fuck Trump for fucking real, but fuck some of the shit that has gone down in the Democratic Party that has failed people like me and you. And more so, Palestine. And more so, every marginalized community in the world. So no, I'm not gonna settle for what the options that are in front of me. And you're not gonna make me feel bad for that. So yeah, I'm voting for fucking Kamala. But I'm not settling for what has been offered because that's questionable. It's questionable that our actions of our government, the actions of the internet, the actions of you and me. If this is what you are not understanding, you know what? Endorsing someone, if someone is publicly endorsing a political figure, that doesn't even mean that they're gonna fucking vote for them. Because as I said in my other video, actions speak louder than words. And I'm not gonna let this narrative of like me not playing both sides. No. This is not me playing both sides. This is me questioning both sides because this is what we have in front of us. So if you look at my statement and you're still like, she's just playing both sides, like she doesn't wanna, no, you're not getting it. I'm critiquing both sides because they're both so fucked up. Voting is all we have right now in the system. And so I encourage it, yet again, vote for who in your mind is the best option for what we have right now. Because it's all we can do. And I hope this makes it clear that no, I'm not picking the sides of what we have right now. Yes, one's obviously better than the other. But Jesus fucking Christ, I hope you don't settle for what we have and put your name behind someone that you don't fully trust because of their blatant actions.
This exploded in the wake of an interview in which Chapel Roan was asked why she didn't endorse Kamala Harris in the upcoming US presidential election, something Taylor Swift had made headlines for doing a few weeks prior. Roan, quite rightly, said that she had many issues with the current government, and many things would have to change for her to feel comfortable doing such a thing. But because she said in that quote that there are problems on both sides, Centrist gays took to the internet to take away her gay card, accusing her of being a Republican and generally massively ignoring the context of Chapel Roan being a prolific supporter of Palestine, and of a pretty notable event in her rise to fame when she was invited to perform at the White House, and when she made clear to her team that she was going to protest instead, refusing to sing and reading Palestinian poems, was essentially told, if you do that,
Good to see
the
you.
United States government will end your career and
How
put
are
you and
you?
your whole family in danger. Why would you support a government that did that to you? Never mind tell everyone else to support them. Never mind that the government has done what the current regime has done to arm and give cover to what's happening in Palestine and now Lebanon. But no, it couldn't be any of that. Instead, we have completely cool and normal takes like, is Chapel Roan actually queer, or is she just a culture vulture?
The whole thing seems performative to me, but she seems to fancy herself a very deep and serious artist.
How are you, Quinn? An ardent defender of the drag community, and somehow on both sides a bad person.
Chapel Roan is an embarrassment to lesbians.
I'm tired of artists like Chapel Roan profiting off queer and drag culture, and are refusing to do the bare minimum when it comes to standing up for LGBTQ rights. Because she's probably afraid of getting cancelled by a small portion of the internet, or is just uneducated.
Hey gays, we should expect better of the people whose careers we finance.
She's gonna be singing Pink Pony Club at the gay concentration camps when Kamala loses. Right, right. Or maybe we should instead actually consider that she never said anything like what any of you guys are implying. In fact, she's been extremely vocal that she's not a Republican or even close. She just so happens to draw a red line at a certain word that begins with a G. And the fact that you all don't, and apparently the exact opposite, is kind of fucking worrying. And if you look at the way some of these so-called fans of Chapel Roan are acting, they're not acting like they're hearing a person's opinion. They're acting like a disgruntled customer demanding their money back. And if you just looked at her full quote, you would understand that she's not the person you all just assumed she is based on one social media post. As the interview that kicked all this off in The Guardian reads, for every UK tour ticket sold, £1 goes to the LGBTQ+ rights charity Kaleidoscope Trust. And at the merch stand in Manchester, there are signed risographs prints selling for £100, with protests going towards aid for Palestine. Wearing charity shop costumes, fans Kenza and Freya say they admire Roan's values. She's probably the only artist that's really standing up for things that no one else is wanting to talk about. It's just my duty to help send resources to a community that's absolutely being destroyed. And even though Kamala Harris used her deliriously goofy femininomenon in a campaign video and seemingly copied the design of an official Roan baseball cap, Roan hasn't endorsed her. And in June, while dressed as Lady Liberty, Roan told the crowd at the Governor's Ball Festival in New York that she'd declined an invitation to perform at a White House Pride event. We want liberty, justice, and freedom for all. When you do that, that's when I'll come. I have so many issues with our government in every way, she says. There are so many things I would want to change, so I don't feel pressured to endorse someone. There's problems on both sides. I encourage people to use your critical thinking skills. Use your vote. Vote small. Vote for what's going on in your city. The change she wants to see in the US this election year, she says instantly, is trans rights. They cannot have cis people making decisions for trans people, period. Not exactly the words of a Republican, eh? Again, Chapel Roan is not a product to be bought and sold. And neither, unfortunately for the Scotch tape industry, is Taylor Swift. Even the most problematic artists in the world are still first and foremost human beings, with all the good and the bad that entails. Being an artist does not make you a product. Or at least, it shouldn't. A society which eliminates geographical distance reproduces distance internally, a spectacular separation. That quote, and the quotes earlier in the video that you might have noticed I've been dropping in, are from critical theorist Guy Debord's seminal work, The Society of the Spectacle, which I have here, peeking out of its dust jacket in what is just a very satisfying detail of this little book. In this book, Debord is not simply talking about the spectacle as in the Colosseum, the Super Bowl, or the Taylor Swift concert, but how contemporary consumer culture and the commodification of so much of our society has replaced relationships between people with our relationships to commodities. Tying back to the wicked and the divine, as well as the response to Chapel Roan's pushback against being made commodity instead of person, Debord compares the role of marketing and the way products and media are sold to the everyman to the role of religion throughout history, where waves of enthusiasm for a given product can produce moments of fervent exaltation similar to the ecstasies and the convulsions and miracles of the old religious fetishism. And while the commodity is made into an almost godlike spectacle to be worshipped, to be considered, to be pondered over, the relationship of the celebrity to the commodity they represent is what I'm stuck on here. A commodity, designed to make profit for those who own the means of production through its sale, is, by definition, a cog in the machine of the capitalist world. This is Muffin, he pees on everything. Say hello, Muffin. Say hello to the camera. When that commodity is a person, they are denied their personhood even while it is used due to the transformation into a product. Even if it is just your image or your voice which is transformed to be bought and sold and made into a spectacle. And when you're as widespread a product as, say, Coca-Cola, even if you are
Bridget
a human
Empire,
being, say Taylor Swift, the image of you, the product that they are selling with your face, your name, your voice, is made into an object of worship, even as you are alienated from it, even as you lose your humanity, and some sort of sick ascension from the mortal world to the production line. This is a process that needs ending.
How you doing, City of Doors?
What are you doing? See how happy he is with this very awkward pose. I wonder if you get this purring on audio. This is a process that needs ending. Oh my god. People should not have to put up with this. Even rich people.
I feel that.
I know, but why would you eat Taylor Swift? Now Travis Kelce, he grilled pretty nice. What was I saying? Oh yeah, possible controversial opinion. People shouldn't be made into products, even at this abstract level. We should be able to perform art without being made into a commodity on the global market. Art should not be, ideally, for profit at all. We should be able to make art for art's sake, just to express ourselves without worrying about how we're going to make ends meet, to truly make what's in our hearts. And this is even worse for art that's made as a commodity first and treated as art second. And that extends to the artist too. If someone can sing, that doesn't mean that they should be treated as if they are a product now, that they should have no private life, that their attention should be able to be bought and sold lest they be seen as ungrateful. I'd love to live in a world where we can enjoy Chapel Roan's music, and if we see her in the supermarket, we leave her the fuck alone. Because why would you harass someone just out buying groceries? Unless someone's explicitly told you can approach them in public, if you don't know them personally, just fucking don't approach them. It's not difficult. And I should know. I spent a whole week volunteering at Worldcon and had lunch on the table next to George R.R. Martin a bunch of times, because there were only so many tables in that food area. And you know what? Despite being the kind of nerd that can name every single side character in A Song of Ice and Fire off the top of my head, I didn't bother him, because he was catching up with his friends, and he'd said on his blog to please not approach him. Still, one day, I was walking from panel to panel and saw him on a bench by the food stands. And he was just sitting down, I think waiting for someone to get out of the toilet or checking his phone. And a crowd gathered around him. A crowd of strangers, much younger than him, around my age, not talking to him, not asking for anything, just circling him, surrounding him, staring at him like he was an animal at the zoo. This is not something human beings evolved to cope with. And trying to comprehend it, trying to stop it once it started, can destroy you. Or at the very least, it will lead to backlash from the very people who minutes before were looking at you like some sort of demigod. Just as easily as they can cast you into the heavens, they can cast you out of it. They can tear that godhood away. It breaks the illusion. And by the illusion, I mean the lie that people tell themselves, so that they can stay in their semi-religious parasocial relationships with megastars. The idea that they know you, maybe better than they know themselves. Because who really knows themselves? But they know you. They've been told by the magazines what you're like, and they've bought you with their hard-earned money. But they can't buy you. they cannot take your personhood away. Leave Chapel Roan alone. Leave her alone. She's a human. And until we destroy this society of the spectacle and create a world where people do not have to give up their very sense of personhood to just be allowed to make a living making art, thank you for watching. They don't get the wrong idea. I hope you know that I'm not queer. I never want to meet you for a bit. Don't do it with me, do it with me. H-E-T-E-R, no. Hairy chest and nice B.O. Guys who want to suck your toes, that's what I want, hetero. H-E-T-E-R-O. Hairy chest and nice B.O. Guys who want to suck your toes, that's what I want, hetero. Jesus fucking Christ. H-E-T-E-R-O. You got me, I'm hetero. H-O-M-O, that's a no. My Kinsey scores his 0. What's it take to earn my gay card? Don't want to be straight no more. What's it take to win you over? Don't make me hetero. H-E-T-R-N-O, hairy chest and nice B.O. Guys who want to suck your toes, that's what you want, hetero. H-E-T-E-R-N-O, you got me, I'm hetero. H-O-M-O, no, no, my Kinsey score is 0. Taylor Swift is much higher. Taylor Swift? The fuck is Taylor Swift? Hey, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you like this video, why not give it a like on the YouTube? There's a button for that. Ring a bell. I've never asked anyone to do that before. That feels fucking weird. Leave a comment, and that helps in the algorithm. Please do that, even if you just put like a dot or say like chapel, or what should people say? Muffin, what should people say? Muffin. He's not talking to me. He doesn't speak English. Subscribe. Tell your friends about it. You can also go to Coffee or PayPal, links below as always, to give me a little donation. Or you can sign up to my Patreon or my YouTube memberships, which is even better, because then you get early videos, access to the members only Discord, my Nintendo Switch friend code. Maybe I'll add my Steam code to that. People let me know if they want my Steam friend code. Is that a thing you can do? I'm assuming it's a thing you can do. And exclusive content such as long-form interviews with some of your favourite YouTubers. In addition to all that good stuff, you'll also, most importantly, get your name read out at the end of each video.
Yeah, I don't know of
My name's Geller Hyundai.
Hi, Geller.
My name is Geller Hyundai. My name's Geller Hyundai. And I'm a war for peace.
Okay.
All senseless attacks I see must cease. So what am I doing here? What do I really want to say? Is that this world has got to change its way. See, I'm going to fight for the red, white, yellow, and black. I'm going to fight for the ones who can't fight back. And I'm talking about all the preachers, from the water to the skies. I'm talking about all the issues, from the truth to the lies. And I'm going to make my stand with a paper and a pen. You want to argue that? Go back to bed again. Cause you're never going to win against what I stand for. So sit down, shut up, and listen as I give you my grand. See, I'm going to target the corruption in the government. I'm going to target the poison in our environment. I'm going to target the injustices to the people. I'm going to hit every target, but I won't keep still. See, I'm going to battle the battle of the battles. I'm going to shake up the cage until it rattles. You're never going to get rid of me. Knocked at the bottoms of the world or cut at the knees. Let me kick this out one more time. my name is Galahudi, and I'm a war for peace. All senseless attacks I see must cease. I'm going to fight for red, white, yellow, and black. I'm going to fight for the ones who can't fight back. So let's keep passing around our information, so we can improve this planet through education. Someone's gotta make the people aware. Someone's gotta make everybody care. So pass that message on, if you dare. And whether it's mine, yours, we all got to share. Because there's more power in one man's voice than all the weapons of military choice. Now you put your voice with my voice, we can shout out loud that we belong to the human race, and that we are proud. You don't have to be a master of science to see that we need to create a worldwide alliance in order to approach the corporations that's asking people for their insubordinations. When they bring up what's happening to our waters, and the diseases spread to our slaughters. And what about the government officials who stand behind them? Their backdoor handshakes and verbal deals that bind them. We've seen how the world can be devastated through the actions of men with minds of hatred. Look at him, Charlie Manson, and even Osama. These are the men who've caused us trauma. I said these are the men who've caused us trauma. Then we have competent hookers in the backseats, with punk-ass teens knifing each other in the streets. We have drug dealers hooking up kids with crack. Why, there's a lot of shit in this world that's just whack. We have people who stand up for the rights and get shot down. Well, you better batten down the hatches. Cause we heading into the next round. Because there's no getting to a war without losses. Lennon, King, Gandhi, they're all on symbolic crosses. Now the speakers of the past are going to inspire the speakers of the future. We're gonna try to heal this world with a metaphorical suture. I said my name's Galahudi, and I'm a war for peace. All senseless attacks I see must cease. But I won't be able to move this world all alone. So just remember that this is also your home.
How's it going, chat?
So if I put my voice with your voice, we shout out
We got
together.
90 people here in Twitch. That's fucking amazing.
And things are going to get better. Done it. All
That's
my
wild.
relations. Peace. All my relations. Done it.
We're coming up on an 11-hour stream.
Of my relations.
You know, if anyone wants to maybe, like, do a little praxis, I'd appreciate it.
Sometimes I feel like Karl Marx, but that would be dogmatic.
Hell yeah.
Drink, I just spilled it on my fabric. If you have that knowledge, then you know you need the praxis. Red book on my lap, you can never catch me lacking. Sometimes I feel like Karl Marx, but that would be dogmatic. Sipping all this drink, I just spilled it on my fabric. If you have the knowledge, then you know you need to. Red book on my lap, you can never catch me lacking. I don't worship idols, man, that shit just be so corny. I be with the masses cause the rich just be so boring. I be on the internet whenever I feel lonely, and I rather feel like
Mehdi Hassan is not anti-capitalist.
sorry, I'm a communist. Take a flight to Cuba, roll a blunt right in that bit. All up in Jamaica, swear you need to see this shit. She don't wear no
He's very comfortable.
give me all of it. We should
We can save it, baby. He's still a good one, you know.
They fed and they be counterfeit. I switched out the AR for the AK like a Soviet. Say I get her high like some opiates. Sometimes I feel like Karl Marx, but that would be dogmatic. Sipping all this drink, I just spilled it on my fabric. If you have that knowledge, then you know you need the red book on my lap. You can never catch me lacking. Sometimes I feel like Karl Marx, but that would be dogmatic. Sipping all this drink, I just spilled it on my fabric. If you have the knowledge, then you know you need to praxis. Red book on my lap, you can never catch me lacking.
Thank you, thank you. I say the words peace and love. I want every single person in here to sing back to me, peace and love. Are you with me? Let's give it a try. Let's give it a try. They're calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. Peace and love. But they're calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terror is.
Like, I don't even want babies, but I would give low-key babies.
They're calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. But they're calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. Let's go. Put your peace signs up in the air. Let's see them up there. See them up high. Let's see those peace signs up high. Let's see them up high. Put them up in the air. Put them up in the air. Okay. Let's go. It goes like this. They're calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. But they're calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. It seems like the crackheads and packies are worrying your dad. But your dad's favorite food is curry and kebab. It's funny but it's sad how they make your mummy hurry with her bags. Rather read the Sun and study all the facts. Tell me, what's a bigger threat to human society? BAE systems of remote control drones, killing off human lives, or man with homemade bomb committing. I know you were terrified when you saw the towers fall. It's all terror, but some forms are more powerful. Seems nuts. How can there be such agony when more? It's like the definition didn't ever exist. Guess it's all just dependent who your nemesis is. Irrelevant how eloquent the rhetoric peddler is. They're telling fibs now. Tell us who the terrorist is. They're calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. But they're calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. Peace and love. Lumumba was democracy, Mossadegh was democracy, A&D was democracy, hypocrisy, it bothers me. Who you terrorists? You don't want to be a colony. Refuse to bow down to a policy of robbery. Terrorism, my lyrics with more Vietnam vets killed themselves after the war and died in it. This is very basic. One nation in the world has over 1,000 military bases. They say it's religion when clearly it isn't. Not just Muslims that oppose your imperialism. Zero Chavez a Muslim. I didn't think so. Was Castro a Muslim? Nope. It's like the definition didn't ever exist. Guess it's all just dependent who your nemesis is. Irrelevant how eloquent the rhetoric peddler is. Are telling fibs now. Tell us who the terrorist is. They're calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. But they're calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. You think that I don't know, but I know Thank you very much.
All right.
Liberalism is supposed to stand for equality, human rights, democracy. Adopted by European colonial empires and their offshoots, self-styled defenders of all those lofty ideals seemingly stand by as a force besieges and murders innocent people.
We have now decided that as part of the process, all applicants for naturalisation must make a written declaration recognising Germany's special responsibility for the state of Israel and recognising the state of Israel's right to exist.
Back to the video in just a minute. Let's hear from today's sponsor, Incogni. Let me take your attention to two articles. It's old news by now, I hope, at least, that freedom-loving Western liberal governments, particularly the United States, have been staunch supporters of the ethno-state since its inception. The diplomatic cover it enjoys by the grace of those Western allies in international forums is unprecedented and oddly unwavering. For example, in the 34 years between 1972 and 2006, the United States vetoed 42 UN Security Council resolutions critical of it. That's more vetoes than the rest of the Security Council in the same period combined. Those veto resolutions were supposed to barely address such unserious issues like the in Gaza or the violent illegal settlement expansion in the West Bank. This Western barrier has nullified even those minor international efforts, if you could even call them that, to hold to something approaching responsible. Surprising absolutely nobody with two firing neurons, this allows to pursue its frantic campaign without fear of repercussion. This diplomatic protection comes packaged with a sweet military aid deal that is unparalleled in scale and scope. Receiving an estimated $310 billion adjusted for inflation since 1948, Israel has been the largest cumulative recipient of US foreign aid in terms of total assistance. This aid has made the military wing of that occupation force into one of the most technologically advanced organizations in the world. The US commitment to funding the government is codified in the 2014 Memorandum of Understanding signed by President Obama that guarantees $3.8 billion in military aid annually through 2028. This package includes $500 million earmarked for jointly developed missile defense systems such as the Iron Dome and David Sling. However, it serves another even more sinister purpose.
We must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel.
This aid includes advanced jets like the F-35 Lightning stealth fighter, used to bomb people living on desolate beaches in tents without food or water, let alone effective defensive weapons or advanced aircraft detection equipment. This is all part of ensuring maintains a so-called qualitative military edge, meaning possessing overwhelming firepower, up to and including nuclear weapons as a means of deterrence. This isn't just a US policy, it's the law. I'm not joking, this isn't a bit. The law requires the United States to ensure it can defeat any credible conventional military threat. So, in practice, this policy isn't defensive. It merely enables it to project power across the region, intimidate and protect a population of over 600,000 illegal settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
I will veto any attempt by the UN to impose its will on the Jewish state. It will be vetoed 100%.
Lobbying is also a major part of the diplomatic side of the equation, and no organization wields more power on that front than the American Public Affairs Committee and other similar organizations. They collectively ensure that any attempt to change behavior and or policy with anything even resembling punishment or accountability is met with fierce opposition. A rigged political system serving a foreign government. It's well documented, almost to the point of nausea, that US policymakers endlessly debate how to influence it without using any of the overwhelming power that they have over them, including placing conditions on aid, a standard and very mild punishment in diplomacy deemed unthinkable when it comes to it, largely due to the risk of being or worse, anti-Semitic, a label that has been weaponized to stifle legitimate criticism of that state. It is in fact anti-Semitic to link to Judaism, but that's a conversation for another time. This has been the status quo for decades and has had a major role in leading us to where we are today. The very tools that could be used to pressure it into changing its policies, such as conditioning military aid, sanctions, or military intervention, are employed to reinforce its place in the world, rather than aid the actually oppressed. For instance, the ongoing issue of illegal settlement expansion is only possible because US aid basically supplies the infrastructure and security apparatus that makes these settlements and the occupation as a whole possible. The discourse around the plan is carefully crafted, mostly by liberal think tanks and liberal media darlings, to make Americans identify with the citizens, which, given America's own colonial history, is easy to do. The language of shared values and strategic alliances are euphemisms to mask the underlying reality, ironically truthful in how shared the values really are for both nations, of racism and slaughter on the ground. This support has also meant that behavior hasn't affected its economy until very recently. While it begins to suffer limited consequences due to their ongoing genocide of Palestinians, that state stands as the 14th richest so-called country per capita. Based just on this, without looking at anything else, Americans should be outraged that US aid to the occupation remains so substantial and unconditioned while they themselves suffer without healthcare and shelter. This level of support is slowly becoming difficult to justify, but it isn't at the level yet to make any real difference. Conveniently overlooked in all this is the fact that the occupation's actions are fundamentally at odds with the stated values of democracy and human rights that on paper these liberal governments claim to uphold. Meanwhile, their vassal state commits and we're not supposed to blink an eye. The humanitarian impact of these policies has been devastating. Current reports have only been able to account for a fraction of the likely total death toll. The Lancet recently pointed out that it could be, conservatively, over 186,000 people. They only show the 40,000 number because that's the number of Palestinians that have been identified, an insultingly low figure. These aren't and should never be just numbers. They represent tens of thousands of lives lost, families shattered. The US and other liberal governments are accomplices in this violence, and if the ICC had any teeth or real integrity, there would have been a lot more arrest warrants issued. How did we get here? How did the freedom and democracy ideology find itself supporting a ethno-state in the 21st century? To answer that, we'll go back to the 18th century, and back in the glow of the so-called Enlightenment. It's around this time that liberalism, once a fringe idea, begins to gain traction. As a result, this period is often romanticized by liberals as the dawn of reason, when values such as individual liberty, rule of law, and of course the right to private property became the cornerstones of what we call liberalism. It's this ideology which has shaped most Western so-called democracies as we know them today. But the same people who championed these ideals also laid the groundwork for colonialism, chattel slavery, and systemic racism. While it is true the Enlightenment is an 18th century phenomenon, our story really kicks off around 300 years earlier, in 1492. The so-called discovery of America by the Spanish is hailed as an achievement worthy of awe. How you can discover a place already inhabited is left unexplained. But this marks the beginning of Eurocentric institutionalism. This ideology, which predates liberalism, says that all races and peoples are capable of developing, but only when they have acquired rational institutions through a Western civilizing mission. The final form of this idea, codified in the 19th century, says science proves that Europeans are the superior race, culture, and society. Well, isn't that just lucky? Therefore, the subjugation of other cultures and populations in order to civilize them is good, actually. With this superiority complex, global societies outside of Europe were, and still are, cast as backward, unable to progress without the West and its big white man-powered brain. But wait, races? Where did the concept of race come from? In short, also liberalism. Before the age of colonization, enlightenment, the modern idea of race didn't exist. Race, an arbitrary hierarchy based on supposed biological differences, was purpose-built to justify the brutal, inhumane treatment of non-European peoples in a variety of degrading ways. What may have begun as a way to explain the phenotypic differences between people evolved into a tool for maintaining oppressive racial and colonial violence. Today, this racial classification is part of the foundation for the general exploitation of the global South that persists to this day. Enter John Locke, the father of liberalism. Locke is famous for his supposedly unique and original advocacy for life, liberty, and property. But while Locke railed against political slavery imposed by absolute monarchies, he had no qualms about the literal enslavement of African peoples. In fact, Locke was directly involved in the transatlantic slave trade, holding investments in the Royal African Company. No points for guessing what they did. Unsurprisingly, Locke's views on indigenous peoples were no less horrifying. He saw them as obstacles to progress, due in part to not understanding complex concepts like property or the value of labor, things indigenous people everywhere had but valued differently. It's Locke who gives future genocidal maniacs one of the most powerful racist ideas of all time. Lands inhabited by indigenous peoples are vacant, waiting to be claimed by those who can improve it through labor. Since this time, Locke's definition of vacant or uncultivated land has been and is still used as justification for the displacement and extermination of indigenous populations all over the world. And as convenient as it would be to blame one person for this, Locke wasn't alone in these views. His ideas were echoed by other prominent thinkers of the time, such as Hugo Grotius and John Stuart Mill. Grotius, considered the father of international law, provided a framework that justified both slavery and the genocidal practices being carried out in the Americas, but in legal terms. Mill argued that despotism was a legitimate form of government when dealing with barbarians, but only if the overall goal is so-called progress or improvement. For Mill, liberty was only applicable to those who were mature enough to handle it and thus have a right to self-governance. You know, mature people, like Europeans, who imploded the world twice over during the past century. The language these men used to talk about non-European peoples during the time, terms like savages and barbarians were common, had deadly staying power. After all, they weren't just insults, they were part of a larger effort to frame non-European societies as inherently inferior, possibly even not human, so that they could claim they needed the all-knowing guiding hand of the West to achieve progress and, eventually, if they're good, civilization. This patronizing and infantilizing racist narrative didn't only justify colonialism for them, it made it a moral imperative. The Western world didn't just conquer, it convinced itself that it had the duty to do so. Okay, so we see that this ideology is a foundation of embarrassing nonsense, so why was this narrative so convincing to so many? Was it just about economic gain? Getting filthy rich was absolutely a motivating factor, but one of the foundational beliefs of these racists was and is a deep-seated belief in the superiority of the West. But because they cloaked their insane bigotry in the language of liberalism, it was made to seem normal and good. Say what you will about the fickleness of modern liberals, the original thinkers and earliest adopters were true believers that thought they were burdened by the task of bringing rational institutions to uncivilized peoples. It is disturbing to learn just how deeply embedded and foundational racism is to liberalism. Without this foundational racism, how could anybody justify the horrors of colonialism? Western Europeans, so completely insecure about their place in the world that they had to dream up hierarchies with them on top, had to dehumanize those they were colonizing and did so with alarming efficiency. This toxic ideology paired with advancements in weaponry, such as firearms, allowed European powers to spread like a plague. Not because of any inherent superiority, but because of economically derived jumps in productive capacity that increased productivity and military efficiency. Materialism 101. History is long, and the same thing happened essentially by chance and social change in ancient Iraq, in the Far East, amongst the magnificent powers of the Andes, and eventually in Western Europe. Only Europe, however, developed an international institutionalized system of colonial violence via the steam engine and pig iron. Back on track in 2 centuries prior, though, sadly this colonial violence and exposure to diseases from which indigenous people had no immunity allowed European nations to, more easily than ever before, gain control over vast resources and accumulate previously unimaginable amounts of wealth. The reliance on slave labor to provide a decisive advantage in the global economy all but guaranteed extremely high profit rates. The discovery of precious metals in the Americas, the explosion of cash crops, and the conquest of Asian and African territories were all part of this process, a process that Marx famously described as the rosy dawn of capitalist production. The West's appetite for so-called progress, by the brutal exploitation and displacement of millions from their land, was ravenous. The Caribbean, Central America, South America, various coastal and inland regions of Africa, Asia, and Pacific Islands were all affected by this insatiable drive for resources and wealth. The parallels to modern-day rhetoric are striking. Think about the language used in the so-called War on Terror, for example. Terms like terrorists and rogue states serve a very similar purpose to savages and barbarians, which are now only used by the old-school lunatics and talking heads. They dehumanize, they create an other, and they justify intervention for material gain and profit margins. March 1814. Topeka at the Horseshoe Bend, present-day Alabama. Future President Andrew Jackson, then a military officer, took 700 militiamen and 600 indigenous allies to attack a camp where Muskogee women and children were sheltering. In the aftermath of this so-called battle, Jackson and his troops stripped the skin off of the bodies of the Muskogee women and children they just slaughtered, and used them to make reins for their horses. Jackson justified these incredibly horrific acts of pointless cruelty by saying, in part, "How lamentable it is that the path to peace should lead through blood, and over the carcasses of the slain, but it is in the dispensation of that providence which inflicts partial evil to produce general good." Andrew Jackson is still celebrated as an American hero to this day. This admittedly shocking example is, unfortunately, an accurate portrayal of how liberal ideology facilitates extreme violence in the name of progress, civilization, freedom, and democracy. But before Andrew Jackson, there was the British Empire, the champion bringers of civilization of the era. The British were colonial pioneers, so we should see how they did things. First off, they were driven by the deeply ingrained racist belief that they alone could, and therefore were morally required to, spread their liberal ideal of progress to the so-called backward peoples of the world. At least on the surface, the real reason was capital accumulation and domination of markets. Second, they sought to dominate both the physical and intellectual landscapes of its colonies, particularly in Asia. British Orientalist scholars like Sir William Jones constructed an image of the East that conveniently reinforced the idea that Europeans, who would have thunk, were a superior race. These scholars depicted the Orient as exotic, stagnant, and, of course, in desperate need of Western intervention, which, to them, legitimized their despotic rule over these colonized people who were forced to modernize. The Opium Wars in China exemplify both the dangers of liberalism as an ideology and the British generally. Britain waged 2 wars against China to force the Qing dynasty to open its markets to British opium, which was devastating Chinese society. The First Opium War resulted in the Treaty of Nanking. This is the origin of British rule over Hong Kong. It was ceded in this treaty. They also forced China to open 5 ports to British trade and grant special rights to British citizens. The Chinese referred to this era as the Century of Humiliation, during which Western powers imposed a series of unequal treaties on China to exploit its resources and opium-addicted citizens. The wars were not about free trade or mutual benefit. They were about securing British economic interests through the use of force, at the expense of an entire nation's well-being. Unfortunately, this isn't the worst colonialism the British ever did. India is definitely in the discussion for most exploited people to ever suffer under British rule. One of the British colonial administration's first moves was to implement liberalizing economic policies, mostly through the destruction or destabilization of indigenous industry capable of outcompeting the British, which devastated the economy, unsurprisingly. Devastated doesn't actually quite capture it, though, because they actually rolled back progress the subcontinent had already made without Western intervention. For example, by following enlightened liberal principles, the British deindustrialized India's textile industry, so British-made clothes could flood the market created by not allowing Indians to make their own clothing. This economic collapse predictably impoverished the population, and export policies diverted Indian food supplies to meet the demands of the global market, policies similar to those the British had used in Ireland. The Great Bengal Famine of 1770 killed an estimated 10 million people as a result of these policies, 1.5% of the world population at the time. To give some perspective, World War II and all its casualties killed a similar rough percentage of the total world population. This is among one of the most heinous massacres in human history, and the UK has never been held to account. Of course, Britain wasn't the only colonization enthusiast in town. Britain went to many places from their tiny island to colonize places. The continent of Africa is the opposite of that. Colonizers from many European countries invaded the continent. It It was so significant that historians gave it a name, the Scramble for Africa, from the 1880s and ending in 1914. I wonder why. Again, liberalism rushes in to justify more violent subjugation, but in a brand new place. The major powers held what we call the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885, where European powers divided Africa amongst themselves, as if it was already theirs to divide amongst themselves, conducted under the pretense of bringing civilization to the continent. I'm not being repetitive. History is, sadly. The true desire, however, lay in goals of exploiting Africa's vast resources and reserve of cheap labor to fuel Europe's industrialization. Although there are a lot of bad guys in the story, there are few more notorious than King Leopold II in the Congo. Leopold also claimed to be one of those civilizing Africa, but his rule was extremely brutal, even for the time. It of course used forced labor, but also committed many mass atrocities, resulting in the deaths of millions of Congolese. King Leopold II was also interested in the rubber and ivory abundant at the time in the Congo in order to stock up on money. He was likewise fond of souvenirs. These souvenirs were actually 267 Congolese human beings.
These countries are
At
not
the 1897
underdeveloped,
Brussels
they're
World Fair,
overexploited.
Leopold showcased these Congolese people as living exhibits, a spectacle for European audiences, all under the guise of spreading civilization. Similar events continued in Western Europe until the late 1950s. As the 20th century dawned, the language of liberalism changed to the form it more or less takes today. Instead of civilizing missions, they are promoting democracy, protecting human rights, and bringing freedom. Yet the methods used to achieve these goals are often indistinguishable from those used by the empires of old. Coercion, violence, and exploitation continue to be the go-to tools for spreading liberalism. Oh, hold on, I suddenly remember what happened in 1914 to stop the scramble for Africa. World War I shuffled geopolitics and left the US as the only world power. The result was the United States taking over as the brave torchbearer of liberalism. During the Spanish-American War, the US claimed to be liberating the Philippines from Spanish rule, only to impose its own colonial regime. The Philippine-American War that followed showcased the ability of the United States to brutally repress resistance. US forces killed hundreds of thousands of Filipinos in the name of bringing democracy and civilization. Kind of hard to participate in democracy when you're denied the right to live, but I digress. During the
Motherfucker,
Cold
I'm
War,
gonna
the US
tie your
supported
dick in a
numerous
knot.
authoritarian regimes
Like,
around the
are you
world,
kidding
from
me?
Latin America to Southeast Asia, under the guise of containing communism, which I've talked about before. Democracy only when you vote right, of course. Not for the people, but for the Wall Street Journal readers, as a single song goes. Anyways, these US-backed regimes were almost always responsible for gross human rights abuses, such as massacres, genocide, and death squads. They were propped up because they served some esoteric US strategic interest or another. The US-backed coup in Guatemala in 1954, for instance, led to decades of civil war and repression, with tens of thousands of civilians killed. In Indonesia, the US supported the military dictatorship of Suharto, which is responsible for the mass death of up to 1 million people. Liberalism, the paragon of equality and acceptance, has killed more people than any other ideology in history and counting. NATO's intervention in Yugoslavia in 1999 and Libya in 2011 are a prime example of the iron grip liberalism has on geopolitics. Both interventions were sold as humanitarian efforts to protect civilian populations from oppressive regimes. Interestingly, this never stretches to victims of NATO bombing, or Palestinians. In Yugoslavia, NATO justified its bombing campaign by claiming it was necessary to prevent an ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, despite the fact that most atrocities had occurred after the bombing began. In Libya, the intervention was justified by the need to protect civilians from Gaddafi's evil government, yet the result was destabilization, misery, the proliferation of armed militias, and a severe humanitarian crisis. In both cases, rather ironically, the rhetoric of human rights was used to justify actions that led to widespread suffering and death. Once Western geopolitical and economic goals were met, the feigned worry over the lack of human rights and democracy disappears overnight. It's not just military operations, invasions, or bombings. Sometimes all you need is a simple grift to colonize a country. The late 20th century saw the invention of one such crime referred to as the Structural Adjustment Program by the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. These programs are forced onto exploited, usually global south countries, desperate for any assistance. These programs require countries to implement strict, sometimes devastating neoliberal austerity measures in order to receive these loans in exchange for the sovereignty, meaning that the unelected IMF and World Bank are allowed to dictate a significant amount of policy for entire countries. In Argentina, for instance, the adoption of structural adjustment programs resulted in widespread poverty, unemployment, and social unrest as public services were cut, industries were privatized, and the economy was open to foreign exploitation. In Jamaica, the implementation of structural adjustment programs led to the collapse of local industries, increased unemployment, and a rise in poverty, as the country was forced to open its markets to cheap imports from the US and Europe. The impact on Africa of these neoliberal policies continues to be particularly problematic. Newly independent countries were forced to open their economies to foreign corporations who then would proceed to steal the country's resources and wrote their economic policies for the benefit of the former colonizers, who continue in the same trend though by different methods. Privatization of public assets, ending most or all welfare programs, and liberalization of trade deepened poverty and inequality across the continent. This is in stark contrast to the path many Western European and North American nations took, in which they were heavily protectionist. Rules for me, not for thee, or the other way around, I guess. In Zambia, the privatization of the copper mines, a key source of national revenue, led to massive job losses and a decline in social services as the profits from the mines were siphoned off by foreign corporations. The legacy of these policies can still be seen today, as many African countries struggle with artificial debt, economic instability, and underdevelopment following centuries of colonialism. The International Criminal Court, established to hold leaders accountable for war crimes and atrocities, has disproportionately targeted African leaders and other non-Western allied countries, while Western leaders and their most special allies responsible for similar crimes have often escaped anything even smelling like justice. The case of Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, indicted by the ICC for crimes in Darfur, is a perfect example of this disparity. While al-Bashir was held accountable for his actions, far worse crimes committed by Western-backed leaders like Yoweri Museveni of Uganda and Paul Kagame of Rwanda were largely ignored. Museveni and Kagame, despite their involvement in significant crimes against humanity and genocide, were part of the super special group of Western allies that gets to have their actions excused because they align with Western interests. This selective justice is not just a product of institutional bias, an outgrowth of Western-founded institutions, but reflects liberalism's cold truth. Anything hegemon wants, hegemon gets. Sounds a lot like monarchy, doesn't it? And where has the so-called Fourth Estate, the noble journalists, been during all of this? Have they been speaking truth to power, holding leaders accountable? No, more often than not, the liberal media machine frequently acts as a mouthpiece for these liberal governments and carries weight for their various atrocities. The easiest example I can point to is the run-up to the 2003 Iraq War. The US media parroted the Bush regime's justification for the illegal, unprovoked invasion, while significantly downplaying the threat to innocent civilians and amplifying the lies the US government was peddling to the entire world. Even after the invasion, the media continued to focus on the shortcomings of Iraq's defunct regime rather than the ongoing atrocities committed by US forces, with new revelations coming out even now. This pattern of selective outrage and selective justice is not unique to the US or its allies. It is a feature of liberalism, not a bug. As we look around the world today, we're seeing the same patterns repeating themselves. Same justifications, same atrocities, only the names change. The legacy of colonialism isn't just history, it's also the present. On the surface, liberalism seems to be the antithesis of authoritarianism. Yet beneath the thin surface of noble-sounding slogans lies an undeniable and historically consistent fact. The liberal state, in its quest to maintain order for the economic ruling class and to protect property, resorts to authoritarian measures that make their professed commitment to freedom and democracy pretty hollow. Throughout the 19th century, European liberal regimes used force to suppress working-class movements and maintain their control, demonstrating how the promise of political freedom was frequently undermined by the need to protect the economic interests of the ruling class. Such contradictions within liberalism represent the first cracks in its foundation, cracks that would widen dramatically in the face of the crises of the early 20th century. The First World War, the Great Depression, and the Second World War created a highly charged environment where radical ideologies of all kinds gained popularity, such as communism. But as the left rises, so the right rises to meet it. Enter fascism. The ingredients for fascism proper were practiced in different ways throughout the 18th and 19th centuries all over Europe, particularly by European colonial powers on their subjects. Conditions created by these consecutive crises allowed fascism to flourish, which was, in many ways, a reaction to the failures of liberalism, which promised to restore stability and national pride. So as the liberal states of Europe struggled to cope with these decades of upheaval, they began to rely more and more on authoritarian measures to maintain order, exposing the hollowness of their promises, which made the fascists' more overt authoritarianism appear equally legitimate to many. More egregiously, when the power of the economic ruling class was actually threatened, liberals always, and without exception, rushed to ally with fascist forces against the left. It happened in Weimar Germany, it happened just now in France. To fully understand how liberalism enables fascism, we need to examine Mussolini's Italy and Nazi Germany, two of the most striking examples of liberalism's failures directly contributing to the rise of fascist regimes. Germany's Weimar Republic, a liberal democracy established in the aftermath of World War I, was created in a moment when the country was on the verge of total political collapse. The Treaty of Versailles saddled the country with war reparation payments that left the country broke. The massively powerful far left was systematically suppressed and kept out of power, further deepening the crisis as the liberals stood only to serve their own class interests, as usual. They didn't have any real solutions otherwise. Well, they did. They just served the interests of the ruling class. The Great Depression gripped the world, and the Weimar Republic's inability to address the economic collapse further eroded public confidence in liberal democracy. Unemployment soared, and the middle class found itself destitute and disillusioned. This economic and social turmoil would be weaponized by Hitler and the Nazis to gain support and demonize their enemies. All this led...
I mean, you don't think the left was powerful under Lenin?
Many Germans lose faith in this liberal experiment. This loss of faith helped facilitate the rise of the Nazis with their grand promises of national revival and law and order to gain support. Meanwhile, the liberal emphasis on individualism led to a fragmented society where collective action became increasingly difficult, especially after the left was systematically kept out of power. At every turn, liberalism either stumbled into or directly aided the rise of fascism. Hitler's rise to power was not the result of popular support, it was facilitated by conservative and nationalist elites who viewed him as a bulwark against socialism and a tool to restore order. German industrialists, who had benefited from the liberal economic policies of the 1920s, saw in Hitler a means to protect their interests and stave off the threat of communism. German businessmen placed their faith first in Chancellor Brüning and then in General Schleicher, hoping they could salvage something from the aftermath. When the hopes were dashed, many turned to Hitler, who promised to protect their status, wealth, and private property, even as he dismantled the liberal democratic institutions that provided that wealth in the first place. The relationship between German business and the Nazi regime was indicative of how quickly liberal allegiance to capital led them to work with or even support the Nazis. Their initial wariness of the Nazis was resolved once they started profiting from the regime's policies. The intertwining of profits, politics, and technology in Nazi Germany was nowhere more evident than in the case of IG Farben. The chemical company, which became deeply involved in the regime's plans for rearmament and extermination of the undesirables, had become one of the largest private companies in the world. Their collaboration with the Nazis led to a majority of their wealth and success being directly tied to the Nazi state. The massive rearmament programs of the late 1930s also included well-known car companies like Daimler-Benz and BMW. These companies became integral to the war effort by producing military vehicles and aircraft engines. Business collaboration with the Nazis wasn't confined to domestic firms either. This collaboration extended over the Atlantic Ocean to the United States, where IBM is headquartered. IBM produced technology that was used to manage logistics and ultimately facilitate the Holocaust. Their punch-card machines were integral to the Nazis' ability to process vast amounts of data, including tracking Jews and other targeted groups for extermination. This cooperation was done with the full support of IBM leadership. In fact, the CEO at the time, Thomas Watson, actively sought to expand his business in Nazi Germany despite full knowledge of the regime's brutal, genocidal policies and rhetoric. What were the liberal intellectuals and cultural elites in Nazi Germany doing? Were they standing up against this oppressive regime? Did one of their leading newspapers change its tagline to "Democracy dies in darkness"? No, quite the contrary, actually. German intellectuals like Carl Schmitt played a pivotal role in legitimizing the Nazi regime's destruction of Weimar's so-called democratic institutions in the eyes of the public. Schmitt had been a critic of the Weimar government that provided the ideological framework and justification for the dismantling of Weimar's liberal democratic institutions, emphasizing the need for a strong, centralized authority. Now let's turn from the most notorious fascist regime to the birthplace of modern fascism, post-World War I Italy. It was, much like Germany at the time, a nation in chaos. The liberal constitutional monarchy was completely unable to address the economic crises, nor the growing anger among the working class. The far left was systematically suppressed, again. Predictably, the Italian state increasingly relied on regular Italian military and paramilitary groups, such as the fascist Black Shirts led by Benito Mussolini, to maintain order. They were employed to, among other things, crush socialist movements and restore law and order. Mussolini, LARPing as a self-styled Roman general, marched on Rome in 1922 and conducted the least dramatic coup of a liberal government, maybe ever.
Okay, troll, you can get
the will to govern
fucked.
effectively. King Victor Emmanuel III, under pressure from liberal elites and entirely too old to fight back, feared a socialist revolution more than a fascist coup. He handed power to Mussolini, legitimizing fascism on the world stage, yet again, within the bounds of liberalism. This decision was not an isolated incident, but as with Hitler in Germany, a pattern of behavior firmly rooted in liberal ideology. Faced with an existential crisis, liberal governments choose to ally with or appease fascist movements to preserve the status quo, to preserve the interests of capital. Once in power, Mussolini wasted no time in dismantling Italy's democratic institutions. He censored the press, imprisoned or exiled political opponents, and invaded all public and private life. The consequences of Mussolini's rule were not only felt in the restriction of political freedoms, but also in the entrenchment of authoritarianism in society. The regime's policies reinforced the position of the wealthy and the powerful and worsened existing social inequalities, while crushing any and all opposition from the left. Just as in Germany, Italian intellectuals and cultural figures, who became disillusioned with the failures of liberal democracy as they saw it, enthusiastically supported the fascists. Italian philosopher Giovanni Gentile, once a staunch liberal, became one of Mussolini's most prominent intellectual allies and expressed a vision of the state that was in direct opposition to liberal ideas of individual rights, freedom of the press, etc. Gentile's philosophy placed the state over the individual, providing a homegrown veneer of intellectual credibility to the otherwise empty ideology that fascism is. Even the arts and culture betrayed their precious liberal values in both Italy and Germany. Artists and writers alike fell victim to the enticing and magical promises of their respective fascist leaders because they were disillusioned with a liberal order that had completely failed them. Socialism was the ultimate heresy, and seeking hegemonic class interests, they found in fascism a new source of inspiration and pride. The Nazi regime's promotion of a distinctively Germanic culture, whatever that was, free from the multiculturalism and individualism of the liberal Weimar era, was attractive to those who sought to reclaim a lost, mythical national identity. If this is sounding familiar to things being said by conservative liberals and their fascist friends, that's because fascism has been on the rise across the world, and oddly enough, it's happening in places with liberal, not leftist governments. By now it should be clear that, while fascism is indeed a threat to be taken very seriously, it's extremely important to understand this. When liberalism, and by extension capitalism, finds itself threatened by crises, it will always, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes enthusiastically, cling to fascism, believing that nothing the fascists could do could ever be worse than what the left would do if it took power. This is because the left would remove all the elites from their pedestals and force them to live like regular people. The fear of losing power over others, and, more importantly, losing capital, is the sign of the severe insecurity of liberalism. Europe only broke with its bewitchment with fascism when the writing was on the wall. Communism is rapidly approaching, and we need to rehabilitate the old enemy to fight the new. As General Zhukov said, we have liberated Europe from fascism, but they will never forgive us for it. What of the Holocaust and concentration camps? The West, rife with its concentration camps for Libyans, Cherokees, and Namibians, were suddenly reminded of its liberal ideals and came to the conclusion that the Jews of Europe were, in fact, oh my, white, and hence the crimes were reprehensible. No such remembrance or atonement has been made for any other population based on nothing more than racialized hierarchies made up by the same diseased minds. We need to atone because they were white. The Libyans, Cherokees, and Namibians were not. Liberalism is a death cult. But how? Simply, it's the liberal dedication to and obsession with capitalism. Liberalism refuses to operate or tolerate any other economic system. This creates the death cult. Liberalism needs to convert everyone else to their system, often violently, and use the thin bringing democracy excuse to do so. It doesn't bring democracy, of course. What they really bring is capitalism, and a capitalism that specifically benefits them solely. The rule-based order. This
no, but he works with
allows
JT
foreign
sometimes.
capital to render most of the control of resources
they have
of
a
a country
podcast
in
together.
the hands of unelected foreign corporations, or worse, even individual billionaires. Imperial capitalism is the modern, non-military way the West colonizes countries today. In 2011, Greece became a victim of neoliberal austerity policy terrorism, for lack of a better term. Put yours in the comments. And provides us with a good example to analyze. The country had spiraled into economic collapse because of capitalism, remember. So, being clearly in need, the European Union, of which Greece is a member, and the International Monetary Fund imposed severe austerity policies they claimed were to stabilize Greece's economy. And if you've been paying attention or have just watched my channel at all, then the rest of this info will be unsurprising. As soon as these insane policies were implemented, Greece plunged deeper into crisis. It also, conveniently for the IMF, saddled Greece with a debt they can't possibly pay back on the terms agreed to. But Greece was vulnerable and desperate, so of course they took it. The austerity package slashed the public sector from 53% of GDP to 44% in just 6 years. This wasn't just about tightening the belt. It meant mass layoffs, brutal cuts to public spending, and a fire sale of state assets at the worst possible moment, with airports, ports, and motorways sold off to the highest bidder. Youth unemployment soared to 26%, an entire generation left with little to no hope for their future. The new policies stifled growth for 5 years, which worsened the recession. The need for, ironically, additional government bailouts soared as banks and businesses continued to fail. Greece's plight wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern that played out across Europe. For example, in Portugal, the national debt ballooned from 62% of GDP in 2006 to 108% by 2012. Ireland had a similar experience and watched its net debt to GDP ratio explode from 25% in 2007 to 106% by 2012. Spain, you guessed it, had a bad time too. Triggered by a massive housing bubble, property prices rose by a ridiculous 115% between 1997 and 2007. This sent unemployment from 8% to 25% within 3 years and pushed youth unemployment to a staggering 52% by mid-2012. These aren't just statistics, they're a damning indictment of a system that prioritizes capital over people. The austerity measures imposed across Europe were never truly about economic recovery. They are about ensuring that international creditors got their pound of flesh, regardless of the human cost. That's what they do to their darling European compatriots. Imagine what they do to the global south. By now you've noticed a pattern, I'm sure. The neoliberal austerity playbook is cut public spending, reduce debt, restore confidence in the markets, ignore the socioeconomic consequences of the previous steps, and then repeat. But since capital is, like cancer, looking for ever more growth, this isn't confined to Europe. Most of Latin America has been a long-suffering victim of neoliberal policies for decades, turning the region into a playground for multinational corporations. This well-documented exploitation has left the continent impoverished and dependent on the West. Brazil's iron-rich Paraopeba Valley, for example, became a battleground where 2 presidents were overthrown before a military dictatorship handed control of the region's resources to foreign corporations. Similarly, in Venezuela, the US military secured the profits of oil giants like Standard Oil and Gulf by, well, securing Venezuela's vast petroleum reserves. Because all the profit flows to foreign investors, not just in Venezuela but elsewhere also, these countries effectively lost their sovereignty and right to self-determination since foreign investors dictated their economic policies. In the wider global south, many countries are trapped in cycles of debt and dependency. A big part of this dependency is keeping these places underdeveloped. As Walter Rodney said in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, underdevelopment was not an accidental byproduct of colonialism, but its very purpose. The economic structures imposed by colonial powers were designed to keep African economies subservient in a system that continues to this day, with foreign companies still dominating key sectors and extracting natural resources while contributing little to local development. Speaking of Africa, the Niger Delta has had its oil stolen by multinational corporations. Oil spills and gas flaring have destroyed the very local ecosystems, making traditional farming and fishing impossible, and just generally forcing the local population to bear the brunt of the fallout. Egypt and Tunisia saw their economies hauled out by privatization and deregulation, leading to, again, sky-high unemployment and a shattered economy. Entire futures lost. And last but not least, the next victim is the United States.
Knight Rider.
Yes, the world champion of neoliberalism has indeed become a victim of its own poison. This is of course about the 2008 financial crisis in the US, which appears to have been a major turning point in the decline of the United States, since it exposed deep vulnerabilities of what turned out to be a delusional economy. Millions of Americans lost their homes and jobs, workers saw their wages stagnate even further since the 1970s, and public services were slashed to the bone while those responsible for the crisis were able to run to the bank with a ton of taxpayer cash. This growing inequality sparked movements like Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter that attempted to challenge the status quo. This collection of crises wasn't, and still isn't, an anomaly. It's been referred to as disaster capitalism, where crises are exploited to impose neoliberal policies. At every turn, the interests of capital are paramount over all else. By king over colonial holdings, by shareholders over global south natural resources. At every turn, humanity, the environment, even ideas are sacrificed at the altar of capitalism, for the benefit of the narrowest sliver of humanity, all while liberalism provides the ideological justification for this false idol. The ultimate expression of capitalism's threat to human lives isn't confined to a handful of states in various places on Earth. Capitalism's need for infinite growth, again, like cancer, will make the planet near to completely unlivable for humans and animals alike. Can't be more death cult than destroying the entire planet's ecosystem, really. What's worse? We see the consequences everywhere. Our planet is scarred by capitalism's toxic footprint, from radioactive metals in Arctic glaciers to immense plastic garbage patches swirling in our oceans. Liberalism will insist that all of this is because of people doing capitalism wrong, but the truth is, this is the system functioning exactly as intended, consequences and all. And that, simply stated, is why capitalism is such an existential threat to life on Earth.
How's it going?
The global south, of course, will suffer the most due to climate change while contributing the least to it. The global north will also experience problems due to climate change. In the US, the fracking boom has caused widespread water contamination and earthquakes in states nowhere near plate faults like Oklahoma and Texas. In Europe, cities like London and Paris regularly exceed safe levels of air pollution because of the West's addiction to oil and cheap sources of energy without proper investment in green alternatives. However, I don't want to paint a picture of people in the global north suffering the consequences as badly or at least as quickly because, of course, it has the capital and infrastructure to stay comfortable longer. The worst the global north will experience are major unprecedented storms and a mild reduction in quality of life. That is, of course, only if it can successfully resist the global rise of right-wing extremism. The fate of the global
just
south,
wrapping up
however,
a
is far
12-hour
more
stream.
dire. We've seen the disturbing continuity from colonial concentration camps to the atrocities of the Cold War. The crimes of liberalism, the secular heresy spread by the bloodiest sword around the world, still spills immense suffering and will continue long after this terminal decline of Western European hegemony. Despite its overwhelming barbarity, it's the global south that pays for the crimes of Europe, be it the Holocaust, colonialism, or climate change. This isn't a story about isolated incidents. It's a thread that runs through time, linking racialized domination with modern ideology and technology. Liberalism, despite its high-minded rhetoric, has consistently upheld the very forces it pretends to oppose for the service of capital. This pattern is undeniable. Liberalism promises progress, equality, and human rights, but delivers colonialism, capitalism, suffering, and death justified by calling it a civilizing mission, or some other demeaning goal that assumes the superiority of one group over another. These liberal euphemisms, changing from one day to the next, are used to justify so-called humanitarian military interventions and severe economic exploitation year in and year out. The language may have changed, but the underlying motives remain the same. They are fundamental to the current liberal order. Despite this overwhelming hypocrisy, liberal propaganda still pushes the nonsensical idea of being a force for good, or maybe even the children of light. This story isn't over. Will it be socialism, or will it be our extinction at the altar of capital? A better world is possible. And that's that. A little bit more candid than usual. I would really like to thank my patrons. This is absolutely impossible to do without their help. This project, as you may have noticed, is way bigger than my usual ones. I would like to make more of these and make them more technically sophisticated with the editing, as well as generally more eye-catching. This is usually financed through my sponsors, who allow me to pay my editors much more fairly than I'm paid as an emergency ward physician. Hint, hint, it's public healthcare, it's not very much. Regardless, because of my particular positions specifically regarding Palestine, these sponsors have found it a bit more difficult to work with me, I guess. It's the cost of doing business, I presume. That's where patrons like you come in. All your support means the world to me and keeps all of this possible. So if you're interested and like the stuff that I do, then please do consider supporting me on Patreon. You'll get my eternal love and some nifty little perks. Maybe a smooch or two, if you're lucky. Thank you very much. I love you all. Alright, roll the usual outro. That's all for this time. If you enjoy what I do, then please consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help. I'd like to thank my patrons, so thank you to Nitro Dubs, Kenny, Thomas Roberts, Nicholas, Owen Baker, T. Wood,
Excuse me as I'm rising out a season of deflation. Hermit in the cave's been my biggest inspiration. Trying not to beat myself up for beating myself up over what I didn't know. Trying my best not to spiral. I wanna sleep with you, but I can't even sleep with me. It gets too crowded in my head, room at full capacity. ADHD, what the doctor wrote, I find it buried inside my nose. Too many femmes not diagnosed, cleaning up after bros. Social capital and stages, token round a neck. Burden of representation, paycheck to paycheck. I really need a therapist who's not a white apologist. Biggest fear is trypophobia.
Thanks for being here today, everyone. We are gonna call that a stream.
Presto make me a Canadiano, but we're still on stolen land, bro. Never got an invitation to settle in flannel. My people working overtime, pattern of survival.
Thank you, mods, on both platforms for all your hard work. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Really appreciate it. Great stream today. Soleil says, no, it's only been 15 hours.
Cheer 100. Comrade Sky cheered 100 bits.
Last minute hypers.
I'm mortal. Fuck it up. I'm mortal. I'm learning. I'm mortal. Fuck it up. I'm mortal. Take care. I'm mortal. Fuck it up. I'm mortal. I'm learning. I'm getting better at not running from the things that make me sad. Used to only feel deserving when
Thanks for the bits, Comradsky.
They handing out awards to the sacrificial lamb, so exhausted to the bone. Thanks for making me laugh. And now I lie with you, we're holding hands when we sleep. You drag me to the mirror,
Jacob, thanks for subscribing earlier. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Our mother tongue sound better than the jargon of this industry. Walanhiya, kalaniya, see no shy. I'm that bitch that's too lit to quit.
Popped over, yeah, no, appreciate it.
For all of the things we can't see that you do, thank you. I'm mortal. Take care. I'm mortal. Fuck it up. I'm mortal. I'm learning. I'm mortal. Fuck it up. I'm mortal.
I think I made like $1 an hour today. Let's go.
Thanks, Dad.
I'm not your dad.
Thanks,
Cheer 100. Comrade Sky cheered 100 bits.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the freaking frogs gay. Do you understand?
Cheer 100, cheer 100, cheer 100. CJ from the 6 cheered 300 bits.
Thank you.
Real slow for you. Gay frogs.
Making me beg.
Won't you fight for your life? Gay frogs, freaking frogs. I don't like a frog.
I'm not your guy.
Cheer 100. Comrade Sky cheered 100 bits.
Freaking frog crap. Won't you fight the frogs? It's not funny. I'm gonna say it real slow for you.
All right, y'all, we got a last minute hype train. Let's see what we can do with it. I know where we're starting. I mean, okay, like I know where, but where'd the video go? Oh, okay. Type cheer and the number, all one word.
Dad?
I'm not your dad.
Cheer 95. Modabong cheered 95 bits.
Thanks for the 95 biddies.
Thanks, Dad.
I'm not your dad.
Hi, Ryder.
Cheer 100.
You're the 100.
The underscore Nitrider 100 cheered 100 bits.
Let's go.
Thanks, Dad.
I'm not your dad.
Thank you, CJ.
Cheer 100. CJ from the 6 cheered 100 bits.
Oh my god, Joker, we're still doing shoutouts. Cookie, 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 cuckoo, 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 cuckoo.
A kilo of pure uncut white supremacy on the table.
Hey, thanks for the follow. Go down to the Cockatielo, a song that only we know can make us feel alright. And why don't we show everybody how we go to the Cockatielo and we makes us feel alright. Chat, we got 1 minute on this hype train. Less than 1 minute.
Thanks, Dad.
I'm not your dad.
Cheer 100. The underscore Nitrider 100 cheered 100 bits.
Thanks, chat. Appreciate y'all. I don't think we're gonna make it to level 2, but you know what? That's okay. We had a good one. Oh my god, CJ.
Eat shit, peasants!
Thank you.
CJ from the 6 gifted 5 subscriptions.
Thank you. I guess we're doing another one.
What? I'll be through that.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for the 5. Oh, here we go.
This song's called Double Take.
Yeah, it's cool.
I got catcalled at 10 minutes that I've been awake walking my dog.
Keep it rolling, baby.
Hold up, wait. Bitch, hold up, wait. Everywhere I go, they do it. No. So this is what happened. I'm like walking down the street with my dog, and bro comes back to holler at shorty, and I'ma just have to say, look, the hottest bitch up in my city, ain't no debate about it. Go tell that Karen, stop staring, take a picture, matter of fact. This ain't shit, go hit my Insta, matter of fact. I'm that bitch, so quit your bitching, here's a fact sitting. Look, I am a light in the life of others, the side for sore eyes, not to be trifled to fuck with. I am not ducking and covering, I am not tucking in public. I want you to know what my nuts is. I see your empty wallet, looks a lot where I keep my fucks in. Double T, bitch, hold away. Bitch, hold away. Everywhere I go, they do it. Wait. Wait, bitch, hold up. Wait, bitch. Everywhere I go, they do it. Double T. Wait. Bitch, everywhere I go, they do it. I put some titties on my. I put some titties on my. I put some titties. I put titties. I put some titties on my chest, but y'all still be double checking genders. What's between your pants? What got me a lethal? Now if you with it, grab a pistol, pop a piggy in his little dick. I'm about to pop up on that opposition. So where me at? Wait. Man, please just be so jealous. Tell them evangelicals need to eat some edibles, vegan, keto, it could be whatever though. Tell them if they really want me, they can come and get me. I don't go quietly and it won't go quickly. I got a big knife and I might chop a dick. She's free like a mace and walk the line like Dixie. Wait, catch me rolling down magazine. A little skirt, big dick with the purse full of weed. And there's some weirdos with me, some queer hoes with me. And these hecklers reflecting in their thoughts about themselves, they just some mirror hoes. Okay, I'm feeling like Anna Villa Eric. Kill little biggest out Paris as soon as I'm finished with killing Americans. I promise my mama that I'ma get closer to God. As soon as they come, I'm gonna learn where to stop. As soon as the devil stop helping me out. As soon as these Baptists stop calling me faggot. As soon as these assholes stop preaching the shit they don't practice. Even in here, they can see you an ass backwoods advocate. Better back up before I smack this shit out of you. You lucky I'm puffing, I'm weed, and I'm done with the Adderall. You lucky I don't even need to prove anything. So I be doing my thing, and they be doing a double take. Double take. I just be walking and walking till motherfuckers run away. Bitch, I am not gonna give you the runaround. How about the runaway? Just one note. If you got something that you wanna say, they say an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. These bigots don't see our vision, so they need to be beaten to submission. My existence is not up for debate. So if you trans, grab a hammer, shoot them right in the face. It's damage, bitch.
I can't tell you how free I feel now that I've started identifying as a woman.
They when they see me do better, so they ain't to see me at all. They worry about what's in my drawers when y'all should be worried about what's in my.
Let's go. Respect to the trans community.
Fuck you, transphobes.
Fuck you, transphobes.
My friends. Transphobes gon' catch these hands. Trans people are my friends. So respect them for we're going in. Trans people are my friends. Transphobes gon' catch these hands. Trans people are my friends. So respect them for we're going in. Transphobes, show your fucking mouth. I'll knock you out. I'll knock you out. Transphobes, show your fucking mouth. I'll knock you out. You better watch out. Trans people are my friends. Transphobes gon' catch these hands. Trans people are my friends. So respect them for we're going in. Trans people are my friends.
Thank you so much for the hype train.
Transphobes gon' catch these hands. Trans people are my friends. So respect them for we're going in. Trans people are my friends. Everyone. Transphobes gon' catch these hands. Trans people are my friends.
Thank you so much, chat. We got a lot of people in here today. Thank you all for being here. Check out the YouTube for the full TYTT. I will maybe edit some shit. I don't know. I'm exhausted. 12 hours was a long stream. long stream. Thank you guys so much for being here. Appreciate you guys. It's over. All right, have a great day. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Just admit that it is Joe. It's over, Joe. It's over. It's Joe. It's Joe. It's over, Joe. It's Joe. Just admit that it's Joe. Oh, Joe. It's over, Joe. San Diego.